Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to another cozy evening together. Tonight, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to spend the next few hours exploring one of the strangest phenomena in television history. And I promise you, by the time you drift off to sleep, you'll never look at a certain yellow cartoon family quite the same way again. I hope you're comfortable right now. I hope you found that perfect position, the one where your pillow is just right and your blanket is pulled up to exactly where you want it. Because we have a long journey ahead of us tonight, and I want you to be as relaxed as possible for what we're about to discover together. Take a moment to notice how your body feels. Notice the weight of your limbs, the rhythm of your breathing, the gentle darkness around you. There's nowhere you need to be right now except here listening, letting these stories wash over you like waves on a quiet shore. Feel the tension in your shoulders start to ease. Let your jaw unclench. Allow your eyes to rest heavy and soft while my voice carries you through these remarkable stories. Tonight isn't about staying alert or memorizing details. It's about curiosity and wonder and the gentle pleasure of discovering something strange and fascinating. The world outside can wait. Whatever happened today can be processed tomorrow. Right now, in this moment, there's just you and me and a collection of stories about a cartoon that somehow keeps predicting the future. I'm talking about The Simpsons, that animated show about a dysfunctional family in a fictional town called Springfield. The one that's been running since 1989 and has produced over 790 episodes. The show that somehow, against all odds and reason, keeps predicting the future. Think about that for a moment. 790 episodes. That's more than any other American scripted primetime television series in history. If you watched one episode every day, it would take you over 2 years to get through the entire series. That's an almost unfathomable amount of content, created over more than 3 decades by hundreds of writers, animators, voice actors, and producers. To put that in perspective, if you started watching The Simpsons on the day you were born and watched one episode per week, you wouldn't catch up until you were 15 years old. And by then, they'd have made dozens more episodes. The show has literally outpaced the childhoods of multiple generations. People who started watching the show as children are now watching it with their own children. And those children are growing up too, starting families of their own, continuing the cycle. The Simpsons has become intergenerational in a way that very few pieces of media ever achieve. And somewhere in all of those episodes, scattered like Easter eggs across thousands of hours of comedy, are predictions. Glimpses of events that hadn't happened yet. Jokes that would become headlines. Satire that would become reality. The phenomenon has become so well known that it has its own name in internet culture. Whenever something strange happens in the news, someone will inevitably post a clip and declare that The Simpsons predicted it. It's become a meme, a cultural shorthand, a way of processing the increasingly surreal nature of our world. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You've probably seen the memes. You've probably heard people say things like, "The Simpsons predicted it," whenever something strange happens in the news. And honestly, for the longest time, I thought it was all just internet nonsense. Just people finding coincidences and making them seem more significant than they really are. But then I started looking into it, really looking into it. And what I found was genuinely fascinating. Because while some of these so-called predictions are definitely stretches, and some have even been debunked entirely, there are others that are so specific, so eerily accurate, that they make you wonder if the writers of this silly cartoon might actually have a time machine hidden somewhere in their offices. So tonight, as you get comfortable, as you feel the weight of the day starting to lift from your shoulders, we're going to go through these predictions together. We'll talk about the ones that are truly remarkable, the ones that are probably just coincidences, and the ones that fall somewhere in the middle. We'll explore why this keeps happening, what the writers themselves have to say about it, and why a show about a beer-loving father and his saxophone-playing daughter seems to have its finger on the pulse of events that haven't even happened yet. I'll do my best to separate fact from fiction, to tell you which predictions have been verified and which have been debunked. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Simpsons predictions, and I want to make sure we're focusing on the real ones. Before we dive in, I want to set some expectations. I'm not here to tell you that Matt Groening is a secret time traveler or that the Illuminati is feeding plot ideas to Fox executives. The truth, as it usually is probably much more mundane. But that doesn't make it any less interesting. In fact, I think the real explanation for why The Simpsons keeps getting things right is almost more fascinating than any conspiracy theory could be. So grab your blanket, get yourself settled in, and let's begin our journey through the looking glass of America's longest-running animated series. The first prediction we need to talk about is the big one, the one that put Simpsons predictions on the map for millions of people who had never even thought about the phenomenon before. I'm talking, of course, about the Trump presidency. Take a deep breath with me here because this story is remarkable. It was March 19th, 2000. Bill Clinton was still in the White House. The internet was still figuring out what it wanted to be. Google was barely 2 years old. Facebook wouldn't exist for another 4 years. The world felt different in ways that are hard to remember now. And The Simpsons aired an episode called Bart to the Future. In this episode, Bart visits a Native American casino and meets a fortune teller who shows him a vision of his adult life. And what he sees is pretty depressing, honestly. Adult Bart is a washed-up musician living with Ralph Wiggum, still trying to make it big, while his sister Lisa has become the first female president of the United States. The episode explores Lisa's presidency with a mixture of affection and gentle mockery. She's trying to do good things, trying to make the world better, but she's inherited a mess. The government is broke. The country is struggling, and there's a specific reason for that struggle. Now, this episode is mostly about Bart's failures and Lisa's successes. It's a fairly standard Simpsons plot. But there's one line in there that would come back to haunt everyone nearly 2 decades later. During a cabinet meeting, President Lisa Simpson says, and I quote, "As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump." President Trump, in the year 2000, 16 years before Donald Trump would actually be elected to the highest office in the land. Let that settle in for a moment. A cartoon made a joke about Donald Trump being president in the year 2000. And then, in 2016, it actually happened. The line between fiction and reality blurred in a way that made people question everything they thought they knew about coincidence and prediction. When I first heard about this, I assumed it must be some kind of internet hoax. Someone doctored the audio or edited the clip. But no, you can go back and watch the original episode. It's right there. Lisa Simpson, cartoon character, casually mentioning that Donald Trump was president before her. Now, here's where things get interesting, because the writers didn't just pull Trump's name out of thin air. In the year 2000, Donald Trump was actually considering a presidential run. He had formed an exploratory committee and was thinking about running as a Reform Party candidate. It was in the news. People were talking about it. And the Simpsons writers, being the satirists they are, decided to take that current event and extrapolate it into the future. Dan Graney, who wrote the episode, spoke to The Hollywood Reporter in 2016 about why they chose Trump specifically. He explained that they were looking for a funny celebrity name that would sound absurd as a president, someone who represented a certain kind of American excess. Trump fit the bill perfectly. The joke was that this ridiculous, over-the-top businessman would somehow become president and leave the country in financial ruin. It was satire. It was meant to be funny because it seemed so outlandish. And then 2016 happened, and suddenly the joke wasn't funny anymore. Or maybe it was funnier than ever, depending on your perspective. The Simpsons acknowledged this in their own way. In season 28, after the election results came in, they had a chalkboard gag that simply read, "Being right sucks." But the Trump prediction doesn't stop there. In that same episode, Bart to the Future, there's a scene where Lisa is shown wearing a purple pantsuit with a pearl necklace. Fast forward to January 2021, and Vice President Kamala Harris showed up to the inauguration wearing an eerily similar outfit. Purple suit, pearl necklace. The resemblance was uncanny. Mike Scully, one of the longtime Simpsons writers, was asked about this. He said the purple pantsuit might have been a nod to Hillary Clinton at the time, or they were just going for a general power look. The purple color, he admitted, was probably just a random choice by the animators. And the pearls? Well, Lisa Simpson always wears pearls. That's just her character design. Still, when you see the images side by side, it's hard not to feel a little chill run down your spine. Now, I want to be clear about something. The Trump prediction is impressive, but it's not quite as mystical as it might seem at first glance. Trump had been flirting with politics for years. He had talked about running for president as far back as 1987. The The writers were simply taking a known quantity and pushing it to what they thought was an absurd conclusion. The fact that reality caught up with the satire says more about our world than it does about the Simpsons' psychic abilities. But still, they named him. They specifically named Donald Trump as a future president. And they were right. Let's stay in the realm of politics for a little while longer, because the Trump prediction wasn't the only time the Simpsons seemed to have insider knowledge about the halls of power. I want you to think back to 2007 for a moment. It was a different era. Smartphones were just beginning to take over. Social media was still in its infancy. The idea of constant connectivity, of being always online, always reachable, always watched, was still emerging. In 2007, the Simpsons movie hit theaters. It was a big deal at the time. The show had been running for almost 2 decades, and this was their first feature film. Fans had been waiting years for a Simpsons movie, wondering if the show could translate its particular brand of humor to the big screen. The plot involves the Simpson family becoming fugitives after Homer accidentally causes an environmental disaster that leads to Springfield being encased in a giant dome by the federal government. It's a ridiculous premise, as all good Simpsons plots are. But there's a scene in the movie that would take on new meaning 6 years later. There's a scene in the movie where government agents are trying to locate the Simpson family after they escape. And how do they find them? Through NSA surveillance. The film shows a massive room filled with government workers wearing headphones, monitoring citizens' phone calls and internet activity. Rows and rows of desks, each one staffed by someone listening to private conversations, tracking digital footprints, following the electronic trails we all leave behind without thinking about it. When one of the workers successfully locates Marge and the kids by listening to their conversations, he cheers triumphantly. His colleagues congratulate him. It's played for laughs, this massive invasion of privacy being treated as just another government job. In 2007, this was played as a joke. The idea that the government would have such vast surveillance capabilities, that they would be listening to ordinary Americans' private conversations, seemed like classic Simpsons exaggeration. It was paranoid conspiracy theory stuff, the kind of thing that people who wore tinfoil hats worried about. And then, in 2013, Edward Snowden happened. The former NSA contractor leaked classified documents revealing that the agency had indeed been conducting massive surveillance programs on American citizens. The government was collecting phone records, monitoring internet activity, and doing pretty much exactly what the Simpsons movie had depicted 6 years earlier. The revelations were stunning. PRISM, X-Keyscore, names of programs that sounded like they came from spy novels but were actually real government initiatives. The scope of the surveillance was almost exactly what the movie had imagined. Now, in fairness, the idea of government surveillance wasn't new in 2007. People had been worried about Big Brother since George Orwell wrote 1984 back in 1949. The Simpsons weren't the first to suggest that the government might be watching us. Privacy advocates had been raising alarms for years. The Patriot Act passed after 9/11 had already expanded surveillance power significantly. But the specificity of showing the NSA, showing the methods, showing the scale of it all, that hit a little different after Snowden's revelations. The movie had visualized exactly what was happening, years before the public knew it was happening. The show had also made references to surveillance before the movie. In various episodes, you can see background gags with wires labeled FBI, CIA, and NSA. The writers clearly had their eye on this kind of thing. And once again, they turned out to be more right than they probably wanted to be. Speaking of corruption and scandal, let's talk about one of my favorite Simpsons predictions, the FIFA scandal. For those who don't follow international soccer, FIFA is the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, the governing body that oversees the World Cup and international soccer competitions. It's one of the most powerful organizations in sports, controlling billions of dollars and commanding the attention of billions of fans around the world. In March 2014, The Simpsons aired an episode called You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee. The title is a play on the Tom Petty song Refugee, which is a nice touch. In this episode, Homer Simpson somehow ends up becoming a referee for the FIFA World Cup after Lisa gives a speech praising her father's integrity. Now, the World Cup was coming up that summer. It was going to be held in Brazil. and the episode has some fun with the location and the spectacle of the event. But the real meat of the episode is about corruption. Homer is approached by a FIFA executive who explains that the organization needs someone honest because, and this is essentially the plot, FIFA is completely rotten with bribery and corruption. The episode depicts FIFA as an organization where corruption is just how business is done. Officials take bribes. Games are fixed. The whole system is rigged, and everyone inside the organization knows it, but nobody does anything about it. There's a scene where this FIFA official is talking to Homer about how the rot is everywhere, how everyone is on the take, and in the middle of this conversation, the official himself gets arrested for corruption. The episode aired in March 2014. It was funny. It was satire. It was poking fun at an organization that had been dogged by rumors for years. But most viewers probably assumed it was exaggeration. Surely FIFA couldn't be as corrupt as The Simpsons was suggesting. And then, in May 2015, the FBI came knocking. 7 high-ranking FIFA officials were arrested in Zurich on charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. Swiss police raided the luxury hotel where they were staying, leading them out in handcuffs while the world watched. The scandal that unfolded was massive. It involved hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes, kickbacks tied to the awarding of World Cup hosting rights, and corruption that stretched back decades. The investigation revealed a web of corruption that shocked even those who had suspected something was wrong. Executives had been taking bribes in exchange for media rights. The decisions about where to host World Cups had been influenced by under-the-table payments. The beautiful game had been corrupted at its highest levels. Sepp Blatter, who had been FIFA's president for 17 years, resigned in disgrace. Multiple executives were banned from soccer for life. Several faced criminal charges. The organization was forced to undergo massive reforms. The Simpsons had called it, almost exactly, right down to the arrest of officials during discussions about corruption. Oh, and one more thing about that episode. It also predicted that Germany would win the 2014 World Cup, which they did. At this point, I think we should take a moment to appreciate what we're dealing with here, because the political predictions are impressive on their own, but they're just the beginning. The Simpsons has managed to predict events across every category you can imagine. Technology, science, entertainment, sports, business, even weird, random events that nobody could have seen coming. Take a breath with me here. We've covered some heavy topics, including presidents and corruption and mass surveillance. Let's let that settle for a moment before we move on. Feel your body sink a little deeper into wherever you're resting. Notice how your breathing has probably slowed since we began. That's good. That's exactly what we want. We're in no rush tonight. The stories will unfold at whatever pace feels right. And the more you dig into these predictions, the more you start to understand something about the show itself. The Simpsons isn't just a comedy. It's a funhouse mirror held up to American society. It reflects our hopes, our fears, our obsessions, and our worst tendencies back at us. And sometimes when you stare into that mirror long enough, you start to see the future. The show has been watching us for over 30 years, commenting on our politics, our technology, our relationships, our dreams, and our failures. In doing so, it has accumulated a kind of collective wisdom about how our society works, how trends develop, how power corrupts, how technology evolves, how people behave when they think no one is watching. That accumulated wisdom is what gives The Simpsons its predictive power. Not magic, not time travel, just sustained, intelligent attention to the world we all share. Let me tell you about an episode that might contain more predictions per minute than any other in the show's history. It's called Lisa's Wedding, and it aired on March 19th, 1995. That's almost 30 years ago now, which is wild to think about. I want you to try to remember what 1995 was like, or imagine it if you weren't around then. Windows 95 had just been released, and it was considered revolutionary. Most people still use dial-up internet, if they use the internet at all. Cell phones were expensive luxuries that could only make phone calls. The idea of carrying a computer in your pocket was pure science fiction. This is the world in which the Simpsons writers sat down to imagine 2010. The premise is simple. Lisa visits a fortune teller at a Renaissance fair, and the fortune teller shows her a vision of her future in the year 2010. Lisa is a young woman about to marry a British man named Hugh Parkfield, who was voiced by the wonderful Mandy Patinkin. The episode is mainly about whether Lisa should marry this man despite their differences and her family's embarrassing behavior. It's a sweet episode, actually, one of the more emotional ones from that era. Lisa wrestling with questions of identity and family, wondering if she can really build a life with someone who doesn't understand where she comes from. But scattered throughout this episode are glimpses of future technology that would make any futurist jealous. The writers clearly had a lot of fun imagining what 15 years in the future might look like. The most famous one is the smartwatch. Hugh Parkfield is shown wearing a watch that he can talk into. When his first marriage proposal doesn't go well, he flips open his watch and makes a phone call. The device has a tiny screen and functions essentially like a communication device you wear on your wrist. Picture it, 1995. The most advanced watch most people owned was one that could calculate tips at restaurants. And here was The Simpsons showing a character making phone calls from his wrist like it was the most normal thing in the world. In 1995, the coolest watch technology available was a Casio calculator watch. The idea of making phone calls from your wrist was pure science fiction. It was James Bond stuff, Dick Tracy stuff, but The Simpsons showed it as a normal, everyday device that people in 2010 would just casually use. The Apple Watch was released in 2015. Other smartwatches had been in development for a few years before that, but 2014 is generally considered the year of the smartwatch, when these devices became mainstream consumer products. That's almost 20 years after The Simpsons showed Hugh talking into his wrist. Now, I should be fair here. The Simpsons didn't invent the concept of a smartwatch. Dick Tracy had his radio watch back in 1946. James Bond had various watch gadgets throughout his films. The Jetsons showed wearable communication devices. The idea was in the air, as they say. Science fiction had been imagining wrist communicators for decades. But here's what's remarkable about the Simpsons version. They didn't just show the device. They showed how people would actually use it. Hugh uses his watch for quick, casual communication. It's not a special spy gadget or a futuristic novelty. It's just how people in 2010 make phone calls. That understanding of how technology integrates into daily life is what makes the prediction feel so prescient. The writers understood that future technology wouldn't feel futuristic to the people using it. It would just feel normal. It would be absorbed into daily routines, used without thinking, taken for granted. That insight is more impressive than just imagining the device itself. And the smartwatch wasn't even the most impressive tech prediction in that episode. There's a scene where Lisa calls her mother Marge to tell her about her engagement. And she doesn't just call her. She video calls her. We see both Lisa and Marge on screen having a conversation face to face despite being miles apart. The phone Lisa uses is designed like an old rotary phone with a screen attached to it, which is charmingly retro even by 1995 standards. But the concept is pure video calling. Marge can see Lisa. Lisa can see Marge. They're having a visual conversation over a phone line. FaceTime was launched by Apple in 2010. And here's the kicker. The episode was set in 2010. The Simpsons predicted video calling and got the timeline exactly right. The scene even includes a joke that still resonates today. Marge doesn't realize she's on video at first and makes faces while promising that Homer won't ruin Lisa's wedding. Anyone who's ever been on a video call with a parent who forgot their camera was on knows exactly how accurate that gag is. But wait, there's more. Because Lisa's wedding also showed characters wearing what look remarkably like virtual reality headsets for entertainment. In 1995, VR was a failed experiment that mostly made people nauseous. The technology wasn't there. Consumer VR headsets didn't become a real thing until the 2000s and 10s with devices like the Oculus Rift and eventually the Apple Vision Pro in 2024. And you know what? The VR headsets in The Simpsons look surprisingly similar to the Vision Pro. Not exactly the same, obviously, but the general concept of wearing a device over your eyes that immerses you in a different reality. The Simpsons had it almost 30 years early. The episode also features a robotic librarian, which ties into the whole automation and AI conversation we're having today. The robot's face catches fire at one point, which maybe says something about early artificial intelligence reliability. One episode, smartwatches, video calling, virtual reality, robotic automation. all predicted with remarkable accuracy, all shown as normal parts of everyday life in the future. I find myself wondering what it must have been like to work on that episode. The writers were just trying to imagine what 2010 might look like, throwing in futuristic gadgets to make the future feel different from 1995. They couldn't have known that they were essentially writing a preview of real technological developments. They were just having fun, and maybe that's part of why The Simpsons keeps getting things right. They're not trying to predict the future. They're trying to satirize the present by taking current trends to their logical conclusions. And sometimes logic actually prevails, and those conclusions become reality. Let's talk about another technology prediction that hits close to home for anyone who has ever tried to send a text message. In November 1994, The Simpsons aired an episode called Lisa on Ice. It's mainly about Lisa and Bart competing against each other in hockey, which leads to some family drama. But there's a throwaway gag in there that would become prophetic. In one scene, school bully Dolph is shown using a handheld device to write a note. He's trying to write "beat up Martin," but the device autocorrects it to "eat up Martha." This was 1994. The device shown was based on the Apple Newton, which was Apple's early attempt at a personal digital assistant. The Newton was notorious for its poor handwriting recognition. It would try to convert your handwritten notes into text and fail spectacularly, often producing gibberish or hilariously wrong interpretations of what you wrote. So in one sense, this wasn't a prediction at all. The Simpsons were making fun of technology that already existed and already had these problems. But here's the thing. Most people in 1994 had never used an Apple Newton. Most people had no idea what autocorrect was or why it might be frustrating. The Newton was a niche product that never achieved mainstream success. Fast forward to today, and autocorrect is a universal experience. Every smartphone user has stories about autocorrect changing their words to something embarrassing or nonsensical. The struggle of trying to type ducking and having your phone change it to something else has become a cultural touchstone. The Simpsons predicted that autocorrect frustration would become a shared human experience. They showed it happening before most people had any context for understanding the joke. And now, decades later, we're all Dolph, trying to send a simple message and getting "eat up Martha" instead. Speaking of technology that seemed far-fetched at the time, let's talk about baby translators. In Season 3 of The Simpsons, there's an episode where Homer's long-lost half-brother Herb, who had previously been a wealthy car manufacturer before Homer accidentally bankrupted him, invents a device that can translate baby sounds into understandable words. You put the device near a crying baby and it tells you what the baby is trying to communicate. "I need a change," "I'm hungry," that kind of thing. In the episode, this invention makes Herb rich again. It's played as a fantastical premise, the kind of silly idea that could only work in a cartoon. Except now there are actual apps that claim to do exactly this. Researchers have developed technology that analyzes the sounds babies make and attempts to interpret their needs based on patterns in their cries. These apps aren't perfect, and the science behind them is still evolving. But the basic concept that The Simpsons presented as a joke in the early 1990s is now a real product you can download to your phone. We're living in a world where we can ask our phones to translate baby cries. That's amazing and slightly terrifying, and exactly the kind of thing The Simpsons would make up for a laugh. There's another technology prediction I want to mention before we move on, because it shows how The Simpsons doesn't just predict individual gadgets, but entire cultural phenomena. In April 2007, the show aired an episode called Marge Gamer. In this episode, Marge discovers online gaming and becomes completely addicted to a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. She neglects her family, stays up all night playing, and builds relationships with other players that become more important to her than her real-world connections. The game she plays looks a lot like World of Warcraft, which was already popular by 2007, so that part isn't really a prediction. But here's what's interesting. The game has a farming component. Marge spends significant time tending to virtual crops and managing a virtual farm within the game. Farmville launched on Facebook in June 2009, more than 2 years after this episode aired. It became a cultural phenomenon, with millions of people suddenly addicted to clicking on virtual crops and sending each other virtual gifts. The game sparked countless think pieces about social gaming addiction and changed how we thought about casual gaming on social platforms. The Simpsons showed a middle-aged woman becoming obsessed with virtual farming before Farmville existed. They captured the addictive nature of these games, the way they hook you with simple mechanics and social obligations, before most people had experienced it firsthand. Again, the writers weren't psychic. They were observing the gaming culture of their time and extrapolating. Online gaming addiction was already a topic of discussion. Farming simulators existed. They just combined elements that were already in the air and created something that looked remarkably like what was coming. Now I want to shift gears and talk about something that genuinely shocked me when I first learned about it. Because we've been discussing technology and politics, things that writers might reasonably anticipate by paying attention to trends. But what I'm about to tell you involves a cartoon character almost discovering one of the most important scientific breakthroughs of the 21st century. Let's slow down for this one because it's going to require a little bit of physics. Don't worry if science isn't your thing. I'll explain everything you need to know. And honestly, the fact that we're about to discuss particle physics while you're trying to fall asleep is exactly the kind of strange, wonderful thing that happens in this world. I'm talking about the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle. Now, if you're not familiar with particle physics, don't worry. I'll explain what this is and why it matters. But first, let me set the scene for you. The universe, at its most fundamental level, is made of particles. Tiny, unimaginably small building blocks that combine to form everything we see and touch and are. Atoms are made of particles. Light is made of particles. You and I are made of particles. For most of the 20th century, physicists worked to understand these particles, and what they discovered was remarkable. There's a framework called the Standard Model that describes how particles interact, how forces work, how the universe operates at its smallest scales. It's one of the most successful scientific theories ever developed. But there was a problem. The Standard Model predicted that particles should be massless. They should zip around at the speed of light, never slowing down, never accumulating the weight that allows matter to form. And yet, obviously, particles do have mass. We have mass. The chair you're sitting in has mass. Something was missing from the theory. In 1964, physicist Peter Higgs proposed a solution. He suggested that there was an invisible field pervading all of space, and particles acquired mass by interacting with this field. It was a beautiful, elegant solution to a thorny problem, but there was a catch. If the Higgs field existed, there should be a particle associated with it. A particle that had never been observed. A particle that would be incredibly difficult to detect. Scientists called it the Higgs boson, and they spent the next 50 years looking for it. In September 1998, The Simpsons aired an episode called The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace. In this episode, Homer goes through a midlife crisis after learning about Thomas Edison and his many inventions. Homer decides that he too wants to be an inventor and leave his mark on the world. It's a classic Homer episode, really. He becomes obsessed with something, throws himself into it with characteristic enthusiasm, and chaos ensues. But unlike most Homer schemes, this one would have scientific implications that nobody anticipated. There are several scenes of Homer working in his basement, trying to create things. Most of his inventions are failures or already exist. It's typical Homer stuff: an electric hammer, a gun that shoots makeup onto women's faces, a chair with an extra leg, the kind of absurd contraptions you'd expect from someone who once forgot how to tie his shoes. But in one scene, we see Homer standing in front of a blackboard covered in mathematical equations. And this is where things get interesting. Now, in most TV shows, when you see a character writing equations on a blackboard, it's just random symbols meant to look smart. Gibberish that sounds technical. Numbers and letters arranged to look impressive without actually meaning anything. It's a visual shorthand for this character is doing science. But The Simpsons is not most TV shows. Many of the writers have advanced degrees in mathematics and physics, and the equations on Homer's blackboard were real. Dr. Simon Singh, a British science writer and author of The Simpsons and Their Mathematical Secrets, analyzed this scene carefully. Singh is a physicist himself with a PhD from Cambridge. When he heard rumors that there was real math hidden in The Simpsons, he decided to investigate. And what he found was remarkable. One of the equations on Homer's blackboard, if you work it out, predicts the mass of the Higgs boson. Let me explain why this is significant. The Higgs boson is an elementary particle that helps explain why other particles have mass. It's a crucial piece of the standard model of particle physics, which is our best understanding of how the universe works at its most fundamental level. The particle was theorized by physicist Peter Higgs way back in 1964, but it remained theoretical for decades. Scientists knew it should exist, but they couldn't prove it. The particle was so elusive, so hard to detect, that it took almost 50 years and the construction of the most complex machine ever built by humans to finally find it. It wasn't until 2012, after years of experiments at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland, that physicists were finally able to observe and confirm the existence of the Higgs boson. The discovery was announced to the world on July 4, 2012. Peter Higgs, by then 83 years old, was there for the announcement. He received the Nobel Prize the following year. Homer Simpson's equation, written on a cartoon blackboard in 1998, predicted the mass of this particle 14 years before scientists confirmed it existed. Now, let me be precise here because precision matters when we're talking about physics. Homer's equation gives a mass of approximately 775 giga-electron volts. The actual mass of the Higgs boson, as measured by CERN, is about 125 giga-electron volts. So Homer wasn't exactly right. He was off by quite a bit, actually, by a factor of about 6. But here's the thing. He was in the ballpark. In particle physics, masses can vary by many orders of magnitude. A factor of 6 in that context is actually pretty close. For a cartoon character in 1998 to produce an equation that even roughly approximates the mass of a particle that hadn't been discovered yet is genuinely impressive. Dr. Singh explained how this happened. The equation was the work of David X. Cohen, one of the Simpsons writers who holds degrees in both computer science and physics. Cohen contacted his friend David Shimonovich, an astronomer at Columbia University, and they worked together on the equation. They used known physical constants like the speed of light, Planck's constant, and the gravitational constant to create something that looked legitimate and might actually predict something interesting. As Singh put it, the equation is a playful combination of various fundamental parameters. It wasn't random gibberish. It was real math, done by real mathematicians hidden as a background gag in a comedy show. Singh also made a broader observation about The Simpsons that I think is really important. He called it the most mathematical TV show on primetime television in history. And he's right. The show has always been stuffed with mathematical in-jokes, physics references, and legitimate scientific content that most viewers would never even notice. When you have that kind of brain trust working on a show, it's maybe less surprising that some of their educated guesses turn out to be accurate. The Higgs boson equation wasn't the only thing on Homer's blackboard, by the way. There was also a formula related to Fermat's last theorem and an equation dealing with the density of the universe. The writers packed that one scene with enough math to keep professors busy for years. I find this particular prediction fascinating because it reveals something about The Simpsons that often gets overlooked. Yes, it's a show about a bumbling father who strangles his son and drinks too much beer. But it's also a show made by incredibly smart people who put real thought and knowledge into every episode. The lowbrow comedy and the highbrow intelligence exist side by side, and that combination is part of what makes the show special. While we're on the topic of science, let me tell you about Blinky the Three-Eyed Fish. Way back in Season 2, in November 1990, The Simpsons introduced a character that would become iconic for reasons beyond just being funny. Bart is out fishing near the Springfield nuclear power plant and catches a fish with 3 eyes. The fish, later named Blinky, becomes a symbol of environmental pollution and corporate negligence. The image of Blinky is striking, an orange fish with an extra eye staring blankly forward. It's grotesque and somehow cute at the same time. The perfect visual shorthand for everything wrong with the Springfield nuclear power plant and, by extension, corporate environmental irresponsibility. Blinky became one of the show's most recognizable images. You don't even need to watch The Simpsons to know Blinky. The three-eyed fish transcended the show, becoming a symbol used by environmental activists, artists, and commentators. When people want to talk about the dangers of pollution, they often reach for Blinky. Mister, Burns, who runs the power plant, tries to spin this as a positive thing when Blinky causes a public relations problem during his campaign for governor. The fish represents the next step in evolution, he claims. 3 eyes are better than 2. It's a hilarious bit of corporate spin, the kind of thing that sounds absurd until you remember that real corporations say things just as ridiculous when defending their practices. The episode is a satirical take on environmental issues and the lengths corporations will go to avoid responsibility for their pollution. It's smart, funny, and makes its point without being preachy. It's a good episode, classic Simpsons, but it became even more notable in 2011 when fishermen in Argentina pulled a 3-eyed fish out of a reservoir. The fish was found near the Agua y Energía nuclear power plant in Córdoba province. Photos of the fish went viral, with people immediately drawing connections to The Simpsons. The resemblance to Blinky was uncanny. Orange-colored body, 3 eyes, swimming in water near a nuclear facility. Scientists explained that the fish's 3rd eye was likely a birth defect, probably not caused by radiation from the plant. These kinds of mutations do occur naturally, though they're rare. Genetic abnormalities happen in nature for all sorts of reasons, and a 3rd eye, while unusual, isn't unheard of. But the coincidence of finding a 3-eyed fish near a nuclear facility, just like in The Simpsons, was too perfect for the internet to ignore. The story spread around the world. News outlets covered it. Social media exploded with Simpsons references. The Simpsons had created Blinky as an exaggerated symbol of environmental destruction, and then reality produced an actual 3-eyed fish near an actual nuclear plant. Sometimes satire and reality converge in ways that nobody can anticipate. There are other environmental predictions scattered throughout the show. In 1999, an episode featured mutant tomatoes, which gained new relevance after the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan led to concerns about radiation-affected crops. The show has consistently used environmental themes as fodder for comedy, and the environment has consistently provided material that makes those jokes hit differently in retrospect. Mr. Burns, the show's primary villain, runs a nuclear plant with flagrant disregard for safety and environmental regulations. He's a cartoonish representation of corporate negligence. He dumps toxic waste, ignores safety protocols, bribes inspectors, and treats his employees like disposable resources. But as we've learned more about actual industrial pollution and the ways companies cut corners on safety, Mr. Burns seems less like a caricature and more like a documentation. Real companies have done things just as bad as what we see in Springfield, sometimes worse. The show's environmental commentary, which sometimes seemed exaggerated in the 90s, now looks prescient. Climate change, which was barely discussed in mainstream media when the show began, is now one of the defining issues of our time. Pollution, which seemed like a problem being solved, has revealed itself to be more persistent and dangerous than many realized. Corporate negligence, which seemed like the province of cartoon villains, has been exposed in industry after industry. The Simpsons saw it coming, not through magic, but through attention. By paying attention to environmental issues in the 90s and extrapolating their consequences, the show anticipated many of the concerns we're grappling with today. Mr. Burns, who runs the power plant, tries to spin this as a positive thing. The fish represents the next step in evolution, he claims. It's survival of the fittest. The extra eye is an advantage. This is classic Burns logic, twisting obvious evidence of environmental harm into a marketing opportunity. The episode is a satirical take on environmental issues and the lengths corporations will go to avoid responsibility for their pollution. At one point, Burns even runs for governor, and when confronted with Blinky, he pretends to eat the fish to prove it's safe. The image of Burns biting into a 3-eyed fish while cameras flash became one of the show's most memorable moments. It's a good episode. Classic Simpsons. But it became even more notable in 2011 when fishermen in Argentina pulled a 3-eyed fish out of a reservoir. The fish was found near the Agua y Energía nuclear power plant in Córdoba province. Photos of the fish went viral, with people immediately drawing connections to The Simpsons. The resemblance to Blinky was uncanny. When the photos started circulating online, the comments were predictable. Simpsons did it first. Life imitates art. Are the Simpsons writers time travelers? The connection was obvious to anyone who had ever watched the show. Scientists explained that the fish's 3rd eye was likely a birth defect, probably not caused by radiation from the plant. These kinds of mutations do occur naturally, though they're rare. Radiation can cause mutations, but so can many other factors. Without detailed testing, it was impossible to say what caused this particular fish to develop a third eye. But the coincidence of finding a three-eyed fish near a nuclear facility, just like in The Simpsons, was too perfect for the internet to ignore. The image spread around the world. News outlets picked it up. The Simpsons prediction phenomenon gained another data point. The Simpsons had created Blinky as an exaggerated symbol of environmental destruction, and then reality produced an actual three-eyed fish near an actual nuclear plant. Sometimes satire and reality converge in ways that nobody can anticipate. There are other environmental predictions scattered throughout the show. In 1999, an episode featured mutant tomatoes, which gained new relevance after the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan led to concerns about radiation-affected crops. The Fukushima disaster, caused by an earthquake and tsunami, was the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. It raised questions about nuclear safety that The Simpsons had been satirizing for years. The show has consistently used environmental themes as fodder for comedy, and the environment has consistently provided material that makes those jokes hit differently in retrospect. Climate change, pollution, corporate negligence, regulatory capture. The Simpsons has been making jokes about all of these things since the show began, and the world has been validating those jokes ever since. All right, let's shift from science to entertainment, because The Simpsons has made some remarkable predictions about the world of celebrity and show business. I want to start with Lady Gaga because this one is visual and striking and went viral in a way that brought a whole new generation into The Simpsons prediction conversation. In May 2012, The Simpsons aired an episode called Lisa Goes Gaga. Lady Gaga, the actual pop star, provided the voice for her animated self. In the episode, Gaga comes to Springfield to perform a concert and help boost the town's spirits. It's a celebrity guest episode, which The Simpsons has done many times over the years. During her concert performance in the episode, animated Lady Gaga is shown flying through the air above the audience. She's suspended by cables, wearing a sparkly silver outfit with knee-high boots. She performs acrobatic moves while singing. There's pyrotechnics involved, including fire effects. At one point, she plays piano. Fast forward to February 2017. Lady Gaga performs the Super Bowl 51 halftime show in Houston. She opens the performance by leaping from the roof of the stadium, suspended by cables. She's wearing a sparkly silver outfit. She flies above the crowd. She plays piano. The visual similarities to her Simpsons appearance are immediately obvious. The Super Bowl halftime show is one of the most watched entertainment events in the world. Over 100 million people were watching when Gaga jumped off that roof, and many of them, in the back of their minds, were thinking about a cartoon from 5 years earlier. Within minutes of the halftime show ending, people were posting side-by-side comparisons of the cartoon Gaga and the real Gaga. The images went viral. Twitter exploded with screenshots. News outlets picked up the story. The Simpsons had done it again. Now, I want to provide some context here because this prediction is slightly different from the others. The Simpsons episode was made with Lady Gaga's participation. She voiced herself. The animators designed her performance based on the kind of things Gaga actually did at her concerts. Gaga had done aerial stunts before, including a memorable zipline entrance on Good Morning America in 2011. So the writers weren't predicting something out of nowhere. They were taking Gaga's existing performance style and amplifying it for animation. The fact that she later did something similar at the Super Bowl isn't surprising when you think about it. Of course, a performer known for theatrical stunts would do theatrical stunts at the biggest stage in America. That's just who she is. But here's what still gets me. The visual match is so specific. The silver outfit, the cables, the flying over the crowd, the piano moment, even the general energy of the performance. The Simpsons version and the Super Bowl version look like they could be storyboards for each other. It's not just that both performances involve flying. Lots of concerts involve flying. It's the whole package. The costume, the staging, the way she moved through the air, the piano interlude. All of these elements were present in both the animated and real performances. Did someone on Gaga's team watch the Simpsons episode and draw inspiration from it? Did Gaga herself, who enjoyed her appearance on the show, think of it when planning her halftime show? We don't know, but the resemblance is uncanny enough that you have to wonder. The episode also featured a shot of lights in the sky forming a pattern over a stadium. During the actual Super Bowl halftime show, drones created an American flag pattern in the sky above the stadium. People pointed to this as another prediction, though the drone display was filmed earlier in the week and wasn't technically part of the live performance. Regardless of the exact explanation, Lady Gaga flying at the Super Bowl became one of the most shared examples of Simpsons predictions. It introduced the whole phenomenon to people who hadn't been paying attention before. Suddenly, millions of people were aware that this cartoon had a strange habit of predicting real events. Now, let's talk about perhaps the most financially significant prediction The Simpsons ever made. In November 1998, The Simpsons aired an episode called When You Dish Upon a Star. The plot involves Homer becoming a personal assistant to celebrities Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, who are vacationing in Springfield, and later Ron Howard. It's a Hollywood satire episode poking fun at celebrity culture and the movie industry. There's a scene in the episode where we see a movie studio lot, and on that lot there's a sign. The sign reads, 21st Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company. In 1998, this was a joke. Fox and Disney were separate, competing companies. They were rivals in the entertainment industry, each with their own studios, their own franchises, their own visions for the future of media. The idea that Disney would own Fox seemed absurd. It was the kind of corporate merger that only happened in satirical cartoons. Disney was already a behemoth in 1998, of course. They owned ABC, ESPN, and their own massive film and theme park empire. But Fox was a separate entity, home to The X-Files, The Simpsons, and a completely different corporate culture. The two companies seemed like they would always be competitors. And then, in December 2017, Disney announced a deal to acquire most of 21st Century Fox's assets for over $52 billion. The deal was finalized in 2019. The Simpsons, a Fox show, became the property of the Walt Disney Company. The show is now available on Disney+. The sign in that 1998 episode went from being a joke to being a literal fact. 19 years. That's how long it took for the Simpsons throwaway gag to become reality. This prediction hits differently from the others because it involves The Simpsons itself. The show predicted its own ownership transfer. The characters who made the joke are now Disney property. There's something deliciously meta about the whole thing. Somewhere in the Disney vault, there's an old Simpsons episode that predicted the very merger that put that episode in the Disney vault. When the merger was announced, that screenshot from the 1998 episode went viral. It became one of the most shared images online. People couldn't believe that a cartoon had called this massive corporate acquisition almost 2 decades in advance. Entertainment journalists wrote articles about it. Social media couldn't stop talking about it. Now, was this really a prediction? Or was it just good satire? In 1998, media consolidation was already a hot topic. Big companies were swallowing smaller companies. Disney was already known for aggressive acquisitions. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 had loosened regulations on media ownership, and people were already worried about a handful of corporations controlling all entertainment. The joke worked because there was an underlying truth to it, the sense that eventually everything in entertainment would be owned by a handful of massive corporations. The writers were pointing at a trend and following it to its logical conclusion. The writers probably didn't literally predict that Disney would buy Fox. They were making a broader point about capitalism and consolidation, but they happened to pick those 2 specific companies, and they happened to be right. I think about the writers of that episode sometimes. They made a joke, moved on to the next episode, probably forgot about it entirely, and then almost 20 years later, they woke up to the news that their silly gag had become reality. What must that feel like? To make a joke and then watch the world turn it into fact? Here's another entertainment prediction that I find genuinely unsettling. This one involves tragedy rather than corporate mergers. In December 1993, The Simpsons aired an episode called Springfield, which was about Mr. Burns opening a casino in Springfield. The episode is packed with gags and subplots, including one involving German magicians named Gunther and Ernst who perform with white tigers. Gunther and Ernst were an obvious parody of Siegfried and Roy, the famous Las Vegas duo who had been performing their magic show with white tigers for decades. If you're not familiar with them, Siegfried Fischbacher and Roy Horn were a legendary Vegas act. They started performing together in the 1960s and became one of the biggest attractions on the Strip. Their shows featured elaborate illusions, spectacular costumes, and most famously, white tigers and white lions. In the Simpsons episode, the animated magicians are attacked by their own tiger during a performance. The tiger turns on them and they're shown being mauled on stage. It's a violent moment, played for dark comedy in the way The Simpsons often does. It was a dark joke playing on the obvious danger of working with wild animals. The kind of black humor The Simpsons is known for. Everyone watching understood the implicit commentary. These animals are dangerous, and someday something might go wrong. 10 years later, in October 2003, Roy Horn was attacked by one of his white tigers during a live performance at the Mirage Hotel. The attack left Roy partially paralyzed and ended the long-running Siegfried and Roy show permanently. He never fully recovered and passed away in 2020. The Simpsons had depicted something very close to this tragedy a full decade before it happened. Now, was it really a prediction? Or was it simply an acknowledgement of an obvious risk? If you work with wild animals, especially predators like tigers, the possibility of an attack is always there. It's inherent to the act. The Simpsons were pointing out the dark potential hiding beneath the glitzy Vegas spectacle. But still, they showed white tiger magicians being attacked by their tiger. And then it happened. The coincidence is hard to shake. Let me tell you about a prediction that took even longer to come true and involves one of the most unexpected musical collaborations in recent memory. In October 1996, The Simpsons aired an episode called Homer Palooza. The title is a play on Lollapalooza, the famous music festival that defined 90s alternative culture. In the episode, Homer feels old and out of touch with youth culture, so he joins a traveling music festival to prove he's still cool. It's a classic midlife crisis plot with a rock and roll twist. The episode features appearances by several real bands, including Sonic Youth, The Smashing Pumpkins, and Cypress Hill. This was the era when animated shows could get major musical acts to appear, lending an authenticity to the satire that made it sharper. There's a gag in the episode where someone backstage says that Cypress Hill, the hip-hop group, accidentally ordered the London Symphony Orchestra, possibly while under the influence of certain substances. The joke is that these two musical acts couldn't be more different. Cypress Hill, known for their weed-centric hip-hop and hard-edged West Coast sound, paired with the London Symphony Orchestra, one of the most prestigious classical music institutions in the world. The epitome of highbrow meets lowbrow. It's a funny image, the kind of absurd juxtaposition The Simpsons does well. The punchline continues with someone asking about a Glock, and the orchestra members thinking it refers to a glockenspiel, a musical instrument, while Cypress Hill is clearly talking about something else entirely. The cultural clash between street hip-hop and orchestral refinement is played for maximum comedic effect. It was a good joke. People laughed. The episode moved on. Nobody expected it to actually happen. And then, in July 2024, Cypress Hill performed live with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall in London. 28 years. That's how long this prediction took to come true. But it came true. Cypress Hill actually performed with the London Symphony Orchestra, bringing the Simpsons joke to life in the most literal way possible. The concert was held at Royal Albert Hall, one of the most prestigious venues in the world. The London Symphony Orchestra provided lush arrangements of Cypress Hill's greatest hits. The audience experienced something that had only existed as a punchline for nearly 3 decades. The band acknowledged the connection openly. Be Real and Sendog knew about the episode. They had been aware of this joke for years. In interviews before the concert, they credited The Simpsons with planting the seed. Did the joke inspire them to make it happen? Did they think, why not actually do this? It seems almost certain that the answer is yes. That raises an interesting philosophical question about predictions. If a prediction inspires the event it supposedly predicts, is it really a prediction? Or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? The Simpsons showed Cypress Hill with an orchestra, and then Cypress Hill decided to actually perform with an orchestra, partly because they saw it on The Simpsons. The causality loops back on itself in a strange way. Either way, Cypress Hill and the London Symphony Orchestra performed together, and everyone who knew the Simpsons episode immediately thought of it. Before we move on from entertainment predictions, I want to mention a few smaller ones that I think are worth noting. These aren't as famous as the Trump prediction or the Disney-Fox merger, but they show the breadth of what The Simpsons has managed to get right. In a 2004 episode called The Ziff Who Came to Dinner, there's a brief moment where a poster can be seen in the background advertising Matrix 4 as a Christmas release. At the time, The Matrix Revolutions had just come out the year before, and there was no official word about a fourth film. The Matrix franchise seemed complete. The story had been told. The Wachowskis had moved on to other projects. Fast forward to 2021, and The Matrix Resurrections was released. When? December 22nd, Christmas week. Just like the poster predicted, the film starred Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, returning to their iconic roles. It was directed by Lana Wachowski, and it was released during the holiday season, exactly as that background poster in a Simpsons episode had suggested 17 years earlier. Was this really a prediction? Hollywood franchises almost always get revived eventually. The hunger for nostalgia and recognizable intellectual property means that beloved properties rarely stay dormant forever. It wasn't a stretch to imagine The Matrix would come back someday, but the Christmas timing is what makes it spooky. The Simpsons called the release window almost exactly. There's also the Rolling Stones prediction. In Lisa's Wedding, that 1995 episode we talked about earlier, there's a billboard advertising the Rolling Stones' Steel Wheelchair Tour 2010. The joke was that the band would still be touring even when they were old enough to need wheelchairs. It was a playful dig at rock bands that refuse to retire, that keep touring long past what seems like a reasonable age. The Rolling Stones, of course, continue to tour to this day. Mick Jagger is in his 80s and still performing. He still struts across the stage like a man half his age. The band has outlasted predictions of their retirement for decades. The Steel Wheelchair Tour hasn't happened yet, but it wouldn't surprise anyone at this point. They might actually outlive us all. When the band announced recent tour dates, fans inevitably brought up that Simpsons joke. The prediction keeps getting more relevant with each passing year, as the Stones keep defying expectations and physics. And then there's the Tom Hanks prediction. In the Simpsons movie, Tom Hanks appears in a government advertisement encouraging people to support a government project. He says, "Hello, I'm Tom Hanks, the U.S. Government has lost its credibility, so it's borrowing some of mine." The joke worked because Tom Hanks is widely considered one of the most trustworthy people in America. He's been called America's dad. His on-screen persona radiates decency and reliability. If you want someone to vouch for something, Tom Hanks is your guy. In 2022, Tom Hanks appeared in a commercial for President Biden's policies, lending his credibility and trustworthy image to promote the government's agenda. It wasn't exactly the same context, but seeing Tom Hanks doing government PR work definitely reminded people of that Simpsons scene. The show had captured something true about how celebrity credibility gets used in politics. Now I want to talk about something that might seem mundane compared to presidential predictions and scientific discoveries, but it affected millions of people across multiple countries. I'm talking about food scandals. There's something viscerally disturbing about not knowing what's in your food. We put things in our bodies every day, trusting that the labels are accurate, that the systems are working, that nobody is lying to us about what we're eating. When that trust is violated, it feels like a fundamental betrayal. In 1994, The Simpsons aired an episode where we see lunch lady Doris, the cafeteria worker at Springfield Elementary, preparing food. There's a quick visual gag where she is shown scooping meat from a large barrel. The barrel is labeled assorted horse parts. It's a dark joke about the questionable quality of school cafeteria food, the kind of thing The Simpsons does frequently, taking something familiar and revealing the grotesque truth beneath it. Kids watching probably just laughed at the gross-out humor. Adults got the joke about institutional food quality. Anyone who had eaten in a school cafeteria could relate to the suspicion that the meat might be something other than what it claimed to be. Then, in 2013, a massive food scandal erupted across Europe. Investigations revealed that beef products being sold in supermarkets across the UK, Ireland, France, Sweden, and other countries contained horse meat. In some cases, products labeled as beef were found to contain nearly 100% horse meat. The The scandal started when food inspectors in Ireland tested beef burgers from supermarkets and found horse DNA. The contamination was traced through a complex supply chain that spanned multiple countries. As investigators dug deeper, they found the problem was far more widespread than anyone had initially realized. Product after product tested positive for horse meat: frozen lasagnas, beef burgers, spaghetti bolognese, foods that millions of families were eating every week, trusting that they contained what the label said. The scandal led to massive recalls, government investigations, and a complete upheaval of food industry regulations. It shook consumer confidence in the food supply chain. People were horrified to learn that the beef in their burgers might actually be horse. The reaction was intense. Horse meat isn't harmful to eat. It's actually a common food in some cultures, including parts of France, Italy, and Japan. But that wasn't the point. The point was that people had been deceived. They thought they were buying one thing and were getting something else. The violation of trust was what made people angry. And Simpsons fans immediately thought of lunch lady Doris and her barrel of assorted horse parts. Now, to be fair, using horse meat in food products wasn't a new phenomenon. Horse meat consumption is common in some cultures, and the possibility of it being mixed into other meat products had been a concern for food safety advocates for years. The Simpsons weren't necessarily predicting a specific scandal. They were making a joke about food industry practices that unfortunately had a basis in reality. The joke worked in 1994 because there was already an underlying anxiety about what really goes into processed food. The Simpsons were tapping into fears that already existed. They just expressed those fears in a visual gag that turned out to be uncomfortably accurate. But the timing and the specificity still stand out. A visual gag about horse meat in food, followed by a real-world scandal about horse meat in food. The Simpsons once again captured something that was lurking beneath the surface of society, waiting to be exposed. While we're on the topic of health and food, I should mention that there are some alleged Simpsons predictions that don't hold up to scrutiny. Not every claim you see online is legitimate, and it's important to distinguish between real coincidences and manufactured ones. You might have seen posts online claiming that The Simpsons predicted COVID-19, complete with screenshots of characters in hazmat suits and scenes of mass illness in Springfield. These posts went viral during the pandemic, and I understand why. People were scared and looking for patterns, trying to make sense of a chaotic situation that seemed to come out of nowhere and upend everything we thought we knew about normal life. But fact-checkers, including Snopes, have investigated these claims and found that many of the supposed COVID predictions are either doctored images, screenshots from unrelated episodes taken out of context, or complete fabrications. There is an episode from 1993 called Margin Chains where Springfield is hit by a flu outbreak. But the disease in that episode, called the Oizaka flu, came from Japan, not China. The symptoms and the context are different from COVID. It's a flu episode, not a coronavirus prediction. In fact, several of the images that circulated during the pandemic were created specifically to go viral. People photoshopped coronavirus references into Simpsons screenshots. They edited dialogue to mention Wuhan or COVID-19. These fake images spread far and wide because people wanted to believe The Simpsons had predicted yet another major event. The Simpsons has done pandemic episodes because pandemics are a part of human history and make for good disaster stories. Throughout history, humans have been dealing with outbreaks and plagues. It's natural for a satirical show to explore these themes. But the specific COVID predictions you might have seen online are largely debunked. This is actually an important point about the whole Simpsons prediction phenomenon. For every legitimate prediction, there are probably a dozen fake or exaggerated claims. The internet loves a good coincidence, and people will sometimes force connections that aren't really there. Part of engaging with these predictions responsibly is acknowledging when they're real and when they're not. The Simpsons has made some genuinely impressive calls about the future, but they're not actually psychic, and not every claim you see online is true. Critical thinking is important, even when the claims are fun. That said, there's one health-adjacent prediction that did hold up, and it involves the Ebola virus. In a 1997 episode called Lisa's Sacks, Marge is shown trying to cheer up a young Bart by reading him a book. The book is a parody of the Curious George children's series, and it's titled Curious George and the Ebola Virus. It's a quick joke, the kind of dark humor The Simpsons was known for in its golden years. The idea of a children's book about a deadly virus is absurd and morbid, which is why it's funny. You can imagine Marge innocently picking up what looks like a cute picture book and then reading the horrifying title. When the 2014 Ebola outbreak hit, becoming the largest in history and dominating news cycles for months, some fans pointed to this joke as another prediction. The Simpsons mentioned Ebola years before the big outbreak. The 2014 outbreak was devastating. It primarily affected West African countries, including Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Over 11,000 people died. The disease spread fear around the world, with cases appearing in the United States and Europe. For a time, Ebola was all anyone could talk about. However, this one is a bit different from the other predictions. Ebola had existed since 1976. It was a known disease that had caused smaller outbreaks over the years. The Simpsons weren't predicting that Ebola would exist or would become a major concern. They were referencing something that was already in the public consciousness. The joke worked in 1997 because people already knew what Ebola was. It had been in the news. It was associated with horrible, graphic symptoms. The dark humor came from juxtaposing a beloved children's character with a terrifying disease. That juxtaposition only works if people know what Ebola is. The fact that there was a massive outbreak later doesn't really make the joke prophetic. It just means that the disease continued to exist and continued to be a threat, which was always the case. Epidemiologists had been warning about the potential for a major Ebola outbreak for years. Still, seeing that clip resurface during the 2014 outbreak gave people an eerie feeling. The Simpsons had put Ebola in a children's book parody, and now here it was, all over the news, dominating the headlines, making people afraid to fly or shake hands. The timing felt uncanny, even if it wasn't really a prediction. Let's lighten the mood a little and talk about sports predictions. The Simpsons has actually had a pretty impressive track record when it comes to calling sporting events, though some of these require a bit of an asterisk. Sports are interesting because they're one of the few areas of human activity where we actually keep score, where there are clear winners and losers, where predictions can be definitively verified. In January 1992, just days before Super Bowl 26, The Simpsons aired an episode called Lisa the Greek. In this episode, Lisa discovers she has a talent for predicting football game outcomes, and Homer uses her ability to win bets. At the end of the episode, Lisa predicts the winner of the upcoming Super Bowl. She predicted the Washington Redskins would win, and they did, beating the Buffalo Bills 37-24. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The following year, the episode was re-aired before Super Bowl 27, but the dialogue was redubbed so that Lisa predicted the Dallas Cowboys would beat the Buffalo Bills. And once again, she was right. The Cowboys won. So The Simpsons predicted the Super Bowl winner twice, though the second time they kind of cheated by re-recording the dialogue. Still, the fact that they got it right both times is notable. They could have been wrong both times. If they had picked the Bills both years, they would have been 0 for 2. But somehow, the predictions held up. The show has made other sports predictions over the years with varying degrees of accuracy. We already talked about the FIFA episode predicting Germany would win the 2014 World Cup, which they did. That was a particularly bold prediction because Germany beat the heavily favored Brazil 7-1 in the semifinals, one of the most shocking results in World Cup history. That match, by the way, was played in Brazil in front of a Brazilian home crowd. Brazil was expected to win. They were the host country. They had home field advantage, and then Germany absolutely demolished them. It's still talked about as one of the most stunning upsets in World Cup history. There's also a 1992 episode called Homer at the Bat, which featured real baseball players and included a plot point where Yankees player Don Mattingly is kicked off a team for refusing to trim his sideburns. Mr. Burns is obsessed with Mattingly's sideburns and keeps demanding he cut them, even when they're already short. It's a running gag throughout the episode, with Mattingly getting increasingly frustrated as Burns keeps finding fault with his hair. The following year, in 1993, the real Don Mattingly was benched by Yankees manager Stump Merrill in a dispute over the length of his hair. Life imitating art once again. The writers had captured something about the culture of professional sports, the obsession with appearance and conformity, and their fictional conflict became a real one. These sports predictions are interesting because they often feel less mystical and more like satire that happened to age well. The NFL and other sports leagues have always been full of drama, conflict, and absurd storylines. Coaches have always had strange obsessions. Players have always pushed back against arbitrary rules. The Simpsons just captured that energy, and sometimes their fictional storylines paralleled real events. Now, I want to talk about some predictions that are just plain weird. These aren't about politics or technology or science. They're about random, specific events that somehow showed up in The Simpsons before they happened in real life. These are the predictions that really make you wonder about the nature of coincidence. Let's start with the lemon tree theft. In 1995, The Simpsons aired an episode called Lemon of Troy. The plot involves the children of Springfield going on a mission to retrieve their town's beloved lemon tree after it's stolen by kids from the rival town of Shelbyville. It's a playful parody of the Helen of Troy story, with a lemon tree standing in for Helen. It's a fun episode, one of the classics from the show's golden years. The kids mount an expedition into enemy territory, there are various adventures and mishaps, and eventually they recover their precious citrus tree. The episode is really about small-town rivalries and childhood friendship, but the lemon tree is at the center of it all. In 2013, in Houston, Texas, a burglar dug up someone's lemon tree from their yard and stole it. Just took the whole tree, uprooted it, and carried it away. The homeowner was left with a hole in their garden and no lemons. A lemon tree was stolen. Just like in The Simpsons, the specificity of this coincidence is what makes it so strange. Of all the things to steal, someone stole a lemon tree, just like the children of Shelbyville. Of all the plants and all the yards and all the cities in the world, someone stole a lemon tree. I doubt the Houston thief was inspired by the episode. I doubt they were even aware of it. But somehow, the universe decided to recreate a Simpsons plot in real life. It's the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder about simulation theory and higher powers and the basic structure of reality. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Sometimes things just happen. But still, lemon tree theft. The Simpsons called it. Then there's the case of the shard, which is one of the more visually striking predictions. In Lisa's Wedding, that prophetic 1995 episode we keep coming back to, there's a scene set in London. The episode is showing us the future, remember, specifically the year 2010. As the camera pans across the London skyline, we see Big Ben, we see the usual landmarks, and we see something else. On the left side of the frame, there's a tall, pointed building that doesn't match the London skyline as it existed in 1995. It looks like a shard of glass reaching up into the sky, a distinctive triangular shape that didn't correspond to any building that actually existed. The shard is a skyscraper in London that was completed in 2013. It's 95 stories tall and has a distinctive pointed shape. When you compare the building in the Simpsons episode to the actual shard, the resemblance is striking. They're both in roughly the same position relative to Big Ben. They have similar silhouettes. Construction on the shard didn't even begin until 2009. The building didn't exist in any form when Lisa's Wedding aired. The plans for it weren't even public yet. Yet there it is in the animated London skyline, looking very much like a building that wouldn't be built for another 18 years. How do you explain this one? Did the animators accidentally predict a specific piece of architecture? Did they just draw a generic futuristic building that happened to look like something that would eventually be constructed? Is it possible that someone involved in designing the real shard was subconsciously influenced by seeing this episode as a kid? These are the questions that keep Simpsons prediction enthusiasts up at night. Here's another weird one. In 2010, The Simpsons aired an episode where the character Milhouse is trying to impress Lisa by predicting who will win the Nobel Prize in Economics. His pick? Bengt Holmström of MIT. 6 years later, in 2016, Bengt Holmström was named a joint winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics for his work on contract theory. The Simpsons picked an actual economist by name and predicted he would win the Nobel Prize. This wasn't a famous celebrity or a household name. This was an academic that most viewers had never heard of, and the show called it. Now, Holmström was already a highly respected economist when the episode aired. He was considered a leader in his field. It's possible the writers did their research and made an educated guess about who might eventually win the prize. But still, They put a specific name on screen, and that name won the Nobel Prize. It's impressive. There's also the prediction about J.C. Penney. In a 2007 episode, the Simpson family is walking through a dilapidated mall. As they pass by the empty storefronts, Marge comments sadly about a J.C. Penney that used to be there. The store is closed, abandoned, part of a dying retail landscape. In 2020, J.C. Penney filed for bankruptcy during the COVID-19 pandemic, part of a wave of retail apocalypse that saw numerous department stores close their doors forever. The Simpsons showed J.C. Penney as a relic of the past 13 years before the company actually collapsed. They captured the decline of American retail, the hollowing out of malls, the end of an era for department stores long before it became a reality. And then there's the grease theft. In a 1999 episode, Homer and Bart decide to make money by stealing cooking grease from fast food restaurants and selling it. They go around town collecting used fryer oil, and things go predictably wrong. In 2008, the New York Times ran a story about the rising value of used cooking grease, which can be converted into biofuel. And they detailed criminals who had been stealing grease from restaurant fryers to sell on the black market. In 2013, 2 men in New York were caught doing exactly what Homer and Bart did in the episode, stealing grease from fast food restaurants. The economics of grease changed, and suddenly the Simpsons' ridiculous scheme became a real crime trend. I could keep going with these weird predictions. There's the episode about Florida holding snake hunting competitions that preceded the actual Florida Python Challenge. There's the episode about a baby translator that preceded actual baby translator apps. There's the prediction about legal marijuana in Canada, which came true in 2018. The more you look, the more you find. And eventually you have to start asking the big question, why? Why does this keep happening? Let me share what the people who actually make The Simpsons have to say about this phenomenon. Al Jean, who has been with the show since the beginning and has served as showrunner for decades, has a simple explanation. He says these are really just educated guesses. When you've written over 700 episodes covering every topic imaginable, you're bound to get some things right. Think about it mathematically. Each episode contains dozens of jokes, references, and plot points. Many of those are about current events, technology, politics, and culture. If even a small percentage of those jokes touch on things that eventually happen, you end up with a surprising number of hits. Bill Oakley, another longtime producer, puts it even more bluntly. He says there are very few cases where The Simpsons actually predicted something. Most of what people call predictions are just coincidences. The episodes are so old that history repeats itself, and there's truth to that. History does repeat itself. Corruption scandals keep happening. Technology keeps advancing in predictable directions. Political figures keep doing outrageous things. If you make jokes about these patterns, some of your jokes will inevitably match future events. Stephanie Gillis, one of the current writers, explained it this way. There are so many things happening in the world, and the writers spend so much time discussing and analyzing current events, that some overlap with the future is inevitable. They're not predicting, they're observing, and sometimes what they observe continues to unfold long after the episode airs. The writers are smart people. Many of them have advanced degrees in fields like mathematics, physics, computer science, and political science. They pay attention to trends. They understand how systems work. They extrapolate from current events to logical conclusions. When David X. Cohen put that Higgs boson equation on Homer's blackboard, he wasn't channeling mystical energy. He was using his physics background to create a legitimate equation based on real scientific constants. He happened to be working on the same problem that real physicists were working on, and he made a reasonable guess that turned out to be in the right neighborhood. When the writers joked about Donald Trump becoming president in 2000, they weren't seeing the future. They were responding to Trump's actual exploratory campaign that year. They took a current event and pushed it to what seemed like an absurd conclusion. The absurd conclusion just happened to come true 16 years later. This is actually the key insight into how Simpsons predictions work. The show is satire. Good satire exaggerates current trends to reveal hidden truths. And sometimes the exaggeration isn't exaggerated enough. Reality catches up to the satire and sometimes even surpasses it. We live in an increasingly absurd world. Things that would have seemed like outlandish parody in the 1990s are now just regular news. A reality TV star becoming president. Tech billionaires launching cars into space. A global pandemic shutting down civilization. These events would have felt like Simpsons plots before they happened. The show was always reflecting our world back at us with the volume turned up. And as our world has gotten louder and stranger, the show's exaggerations have started to look more and more like documentaries. There's another factor worth considering: confirmation bias. We remember the predictions that came true. We forget the ones that didn't. For every Trump presidency and Disney-Fox merger, there are hundreds of jokes that never panned out. The Simpsons has predicted things that absolutely did not happen. They've made references that turned out to be completely wrong. But nobody makes viral posts about those. Think about it for a moment. If you've made 790 episodes, each containing dozens of jokes and references, you've made thousands of statements about the world. Maybe tens of thousands. Some of those statements are going to intersect with future reality purely by chance. It's statistics, not magic. When something happens that vaguely resembles something from The Simpsons, people go searching for the clip. And if they find it, they share it everywhere. The hits get amplified while the misses fade into obscurity. This is called confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful cognitive phenomena in human psychology. We naturally notice things that confirm what we already believe or what we find interesting. We naturally overlook things that contradict those beliefs or that we find boring. This isn't a criticism of people who enjoy Simpsons predictions. It's just human nature. We're pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains evolved to find connections, to see relationships between events, to construct narratives that make sense of our experiences. This ability served us well when we needed to predict where predators might be or when fruit might ripen. But it also leads us astray sometimes. We look for connections, and when we find them, they feel meaningful, even if they might be coincidental. I think there's also something comforting about the idea that a cartoon could predict the future. It gives us a sense that maybe events aren't as random as they seem. Maybe there's an order to things. Maybe someone, even if it's just a team of comedy writers, could see what was coming. In uncertain times, that feeling of pattern and prediction can be reassuring. Even if the predictions are just coincidences, they make the chaos feel a little more comprehensible. We live in an era of accelerating change where the news seems stranger every day, where the unthinkable becomes reality with alarming regularity. Finding patterns, even imagined ones, gives us a sense of control. The Simpsons predictions phenomenon taps into something deep in the human psyche. The desire to believe that the future is knowable, that someone, somewhere has figured it out, that we're not all just stumbling blindly into whatever comes next. So are the Simpsons writers time travelers? Almost certainly not. Are they unusually observant and intelligent people who have been making jokes about American society for over 3 decades? Absolutely. And sometimes when you pay that much attention for that long, you end up by catching glimpses of where things are headed. Not through supernatural means, but through the accumulated wisdom of paying attention. As we start to wind down our exploration tonight, I want to reflect on what all of this means. Because beyond the entertainment value, beyond the fun of spotting coincidences, there are deeper lessons here about fiction, reality, and the human condition. The Simpsons has been on the air since 1989. That's an almost unprecedented run for any television show. Think about everything that has changed in that time. The Berlin Wall fell just as the show was starting. The internet went from novelty to necessity. We've had 5 different presidents. We've experienced terrorist attacks, financial crises, pandemics, and technological revolutions. Through all of it, The Simpsons has been there, commenting, satirizing, making us laugh. Generations of viewers have grown up with Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. People who watched the early episodes as children now have children of their own who watch the show. The Simpson family has become part of our cultural DNA. And throughout that entire run, the show has been holding up a mirror to American society. It's shown us our obsession with celebrity, our dysfunctional politics, our complicated relationship with technology, our tendency toward corruption and scandal, our hopes, fears, and absurdities. The predictions aren't magic. They're a byproduct of paying attention, of caring about the world and its trajectory. of being smart enough to see where trends might lead and bold enough to turn those insights into jokes. The fact that so many of these jokes have come true says less about The Simpsons than it does about our world. We've become a society that regularly produces events stranger than fiction. Our reality has caught up to and sometimes surpassed the satirical imagination of cartoon writers. Maybe that's the real prediction. Not any specific event, but the general arc of our culture toward the absurd, the excessive, the unprecedented. The Simpsons saw that trajectory decades ago and has been charting its course ever since. Tonight, we've traveled through political scandals and technological marvels. We've explored scientific discoveries and celebrity spectacles. We've encountered food scandals, sports outcomes, and some genuinely inexplicable coincidences. Through it all, one yellow cartoon family has served as our guide. A family that argues and makes up, that struggles and perseveres, that reflects both the best and worst of American life. A family that somehow keeps showing us tomorrow before it arrives. As you drift off tonight, maybe you'll think about what it means to really pay attention to the world, to notice the patterns beneath the chaos, to wonder where current trends might lead if we push them to their logical conclusions. The Simpsons won't stop predicting the future because they never started in the first place. They just keep watching, keep commenting, keep holding up that mirror. And as long as our world keeps being fascinating and strange and sometimes terrifying, the mirror will keep reflecting things that look a lot like what's coming next. I find comfort in that somehow. Not because I think a cartoon has supernatural powers, but because it means someone is paying attention. Someone is noticing. Someone is finding the humor in our collective journey, even when that journey takes us to unexpected places. The show's creators have said they plan to keep The Simpsons going for as long as they can. That means more episodes, more jokes, more observations about the world we're living in, and inevitably, more predictions that will come true. What will they get right next? Will there be some throwaway gag in a future episode that becomes headline news a decade from now? Will some background detail in an upcoming season reveal something we can't even imagine yet? Will some joke that airs this year turn out to perfectly capture an event in 2035? We'll have to wait and see. That's part of the fun. The uncertainty of the future is both terrifying and exciting, and The Simpsons has found a way to make it entertaining. For now, though, it's time to rest. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. From the halls of power to the frontiers of science, from stadium stages to school cafeterias. We've seen how a humble cartoon about a dysfunctional family accidentally became one of the most prophetic cultural artifacts of our time. The Simpsons will still be there tomorrow, making us laugh, making us think, and occasionally making us wonder how they knew. And we'll be there too, watching, enjoying, and marveling at the strange intersection of fiction and reality. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I hope you found these stories as fascinating as I do. I hope they gave you something to think about as you drift off to sleep. In future videos, we might explore other aspects of the Simpsons universe. The memorable characters, the classic episodes, the cultural impact that extends far beyond predictions. There's so much more to discover in Springfield and beyond. But for now, let your eyes grow heavy. Let the worries of the day fade away. And know that somewhere out there, a team of very clever writers is already working on jokes that might just turn into tomorrow's headlines. Sweet dreams, my friends. The future will be here when you wake up. And who knows, maybe The Simpsons already knows what it looks like. Until next time, sleep well, and remember, in the words of Homer Simpson himself, which probably haven't predicted anything yet, but give it time, everything has a way of working out. Sometimes in ways we never expected. Sometimes in ways that make us laugh. Good night. And if you're still awake, just listening to the sound of my voice as we reach the end of our journey together, let me leave you with a few more thoughts. The world is a strange and wonderful place, full of coincidences and patterns, chaos and order. We build things and tear them down. We make predictions and watch them crumble or come true. We tell stories about ourselves, about who we are and who we might become. The Simpsons is one of those stories. A long, rambling, sometimes brilliant, sometimes silly story about a family and a town and a country. A story that somehow keeps intersecting with reality in the most unexpected ways. Maybe that's what good storytelling does. It captures something true about the human experience. And when you capture truth, even in exaggerated, satirical form, you inevitably capture some of what's to come. Because truth has a way of persisting, of echoing, of showing up again when you least expect it. So sleep now. Let the predictions and coincidences settle into your dreams. Let the yellow faces of Springfield fade into the comfortable darkness behind your eyes. And trust that when you wake up, the world will still be spinning, still surprising us, still giving the Simpsons material for another 30 years of jokes. The future is unwritten, except for the parts that were written decades ago by comedy writers who had no idea what they were doing. Sweet dreams. Actually, you know what? If you're still with me, let me tell you a few more stories. Because there are some predictions we haven't fully explored yet, and I think they deserve their moment. Let's go deeper into some of these coincidences. Let's really sit with them and think about what they mean. Remember when I mentioned the autocorrect prediction? The one where Dolph's device changed beat up Martin to eat up Martha? I want to spend a little more time on this one because it reveals something interesting about how The Simpsons approaches technology humor. The device Dolph is using in that 1994 episode is based on the Apple Newton, which was one of Apple's first attempts at a personal digital assistant. The Newton was released in 1993, and it was supposed to revolutionize how people took notes and organized their lives. You could write on it with a stylus, and it would convert your handwriting to text. The problem was, it barely worked. The handwriting recognition was infamously bad. People would write simple words, and the Newton would turn them into nonsense. It became a punchline in popular culture. The TV show Doonesbury did an entire storyline making fun of how bad the Newton's handwriting recognition was. So when The Simpsons put that gag in their show, they weren't predicting autocorrect. They were making fun of existing technology that already had this problem. The joke was rooted in 1994 reality. But here's what's interesting. The Newton failed. It was discontinued in 1998. Most people forgot about it entirely. The technology that seemed so promising in the early 90s was abandoned. And then smartphones came along. And suddenly, everyone was typing on tiny keyboards and dealing with autocorrect issues that felt remarkably similar to what the Newton had experienced. The technology changed, but the problem persisted. The Simpsons captured a frustration that was specific to 1994, and that frustration turned out to be universal. It just took different forms over time. In 1994, it was handwriting recognition on a stylus device. In 2024, it's your phone deciding you definitely meant to type ducking instead of what you actually meant. This is one of the patterns I notice when I really dig into these predictions. The Simpsons often captures human experiences that transcend specific technologies. The frustration of technology not understanding you, the embarrassment of your device sending the wrong message. These are timeless feelings that just manifest differently as technology evolves. Let me tell you more about the Disney-Fox merger prediction because there's additional context that makes it even more interesting. When The Simpsons aired that episode in 1998 with the 21st Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company, sign, media consolidation was already a hot topic in the entertainment industry. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 had loosened restrictions on media ownership, and there was a lot of concern about whether a handful of corporations would end up controlling all entertainment. Disney, by 1998, had already absorbed Capital Cities/ABC. They were known for aggressive expansion. The idea that they might eventually swallow other studios wasn't crazy. It was the logical extension of trends that were already visible. What's remarkable is that the writers chose Fox specifically. They could have made a generic joke about media consolidation. They could have shown Disney owning NBC or CBS or Paramount, but they specifically chose the company that owned their own show. And that self-referential choice is very Simpsons. The show has always been willing to bite the hand that feeds it. They make jokes about Fox all the time. They mock their own network, their own advertisers, even their own declining quality in later seasons. So of course, they would make a joke about Disney eventually owning Fox. The fact that it came true and that The Simpsons is now streaming on Disney Plus adds a layer of meta commentary that the original writers couldn't have fully anticipated. When you watch that 1998 episode now on Disney Plus, you're watching a show owned by Disney make a joke about being owned by Disney before it was owned by Disney. It's enough to make your head spin if you think about it too long, which is maybe why it's good that we're trying to fall asleep instead. I want to revisit the Higgs boson story because I didn't fully explain how remarkable it actually is. When Homer is shown in front of that blackboard with all those equations, most viewers just saw a background gag. Homer trying to look smart. Nothing more than visual comedy. But if you actually pause the episode and examine the math, you'd find legitimate physics. David X. Cohen, who wrote the equation, graduated from Harvard with a master's degree in computer science. But before that, he studied physics at UC Berkeley. He wasn't just a comedy writer pretending to do math. He was someone who genuinely understood the mathematics involved. When he needed to make Homer look like a genius inventor, Cohen didn't want to put gibberish on the blackboard. He wanted the equations to actually mean something. So he reached out to his friend David Sheminovich, an astronomer at Columbia University, and they worked together on creating equations that were not only visually convincing but mathematically sound. The Higgs boson equation combines fundamental constants of nature, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, and Planck's constant. These are some of the most important numbers in physics. By combining them in specific ways, you can derive various physical quantities. At the time, in 1998, the Higgs boson was still theoretical. Scientists believed it existed because it was predicted by the standard model of particle physics, but no one had actually observed it. The mass of the particle was the subject of intense speculation and research. Cohen and Sheminovich put together an equation that would give a reasonable estimate for the Higgs mass based on the scientific understanding of the time. They were essentially making an educated guess using real physics. The fact that their guess was even in the right ballpark is impressive. They predicted about 775 giga-electron volts. The actual mass turned out to be about 125 giga-electron volts. That's off by a factor of about 6, which in everyday terms sounds like a big miss. But in particle physics, where masses can vary by many orders of magnitude, being within an order of magnitude is actually pretty good for a comedy show gag. Dr. Simon Singh, who analyzed this prediction in his book, was genuinely impressed. He's a physicist himself, and he knows how difficult these predictions are. The fact that a cartoon got anywhere close to the right answer is, in his words, kind of amazing. This prediction also reveals something important about The Simpsons as a show. Many animated comedies fill their backgrounds with random nonsense. Fake brands, illegible text, generic visual noise. The Simpsons fills its backgrounds with actual content. Real math, real references, real jokes that reward close attention. The writers have always assumed that their audience is smart. They don't dumb things down. They include references to literature, philosophy, history, and science that many viewers will miss, but some will appreciate. It's part of what made the show so beloved, especially in its earlier seasons. So when you see Homer standing in front of a blackboard, you can trust that whatever's written there probably means something. The writers cared enough to make it real. Let me tell you about some predictions that are slightly less famous but equally fascinating. There's an episode from 2000 called Bart to the Future. Yes, the same episode that predicted the Trump presidency, but there's another prediction in that episode that often gets overlooked. In the episode, the future United States is shown struggling economically. Lisa, as president, is trying to deal with a budget crisis. The country is in debt. Government services are strained. It's a bleak picture of America's fiscal future. This was 2000. The dot-com boom was still happening. The U.S. government was actually running budget surpluses. The economy seemed strong. Making fun of future economic collapse felt like safely absurd satire. Then came 2008, the financial crisis, the recession, the debt explosion. Suddenly, an America drowning in budget problems didn't seem so fictional anymore. Now, The Simpsons wasn't specifically predicting the 2008 crisis. They were making a general joke about economic irresponsibility. But the joke aged into relevance in ways they couldn't have anticipated. There's also a joke in that episode about the United States investing heavily in the Teleportation Research Initiative, which failed to produce results. This hasn't come true yet, obviously, but given how much money governments spend on ambitious research projects that don't pan out, it wouldn't be shocking if something similar happened eventually. Let me talk about the Siegfried and Roy prediction a bit more, because it's one of the darker ones and I think it deserves deeper examination. The 1993 episode where Gunter and Ernst get attacked by their tiger wasn't really a prediction in the mystical sense. It was an acknowledgement of an obvious risk. When you work with wild animals, especially apex predators like white tigers, the possibility of attack is always present. The animals are trained, but they're not domesticated. They're still wild creatures with instincts that can be triggered unexpectedly. Animal trainers and performers know this. They accept the risk as part of their profession. The illusion of control over dangerous animals is part of what makes these acts impressive. But the control is always somewhat illusory. So when the Simpsons showed their magician parody being attacked, they were pointing out something that was hiding in plain sight. This could happen. Everyone watching a tiger act knows on some level that this could happen. When it actually happened to Roy Horn in 2003, it was tragic but not surprising. The surprising thing was that it had taken so long. Siegfried and Roy had been performing with big cats for decades without serious incident. In a way, they had defied the odds for years before the odds finally caught up with them. The Simpsons prediction, if we can call it that, was really just a recognition of probability. If you keep rolling dice long enough, eventually you'll roll snake eyes. If you keep performing with tigers long enough, eventually something will go wrong. This is maybe the least mystical of the predictions, but it's also one of the most thoughtful. The show was using dark comedy to point out something we all knew but didn't want to think about. Let me tell you about some of the predictions related to specific products and brands. I mentioned the JCPenney prediction earlier, where the show depicted an abandoned JCPenney in a dying mall back in 2007, and then the actual company went bankrupt in 2020. But there are other brand-specific predictions worth discussing. In various episodes, The Simpsons has shown the decline of traditional retail in general. Empty malls, abandoned storefronts, big box stores struggling. This was before the retail apocalypse became a household phrase, before Amazon completely transformed how people shop. The writers were observing the early signs of these changes. Walmart was already disrupting traditional retail in the 90s and 2000s. Online shopping was starting to grow. The writing was on the wall for department stores and shopping malls if you knew where to look. By placing jokes about retail decline in their episodes, The Simpsons was documenting a transition that was already beginning. The jokes aged into predictions as that transition accelerated beyond what anyone expected. There's also the Tom Hanks government spokesperson prediction from the Simpsons movie. In the film, Tom Hanks appears in a government advertisement saying that the U.S. government has lost its credibility and is borrowing some of his. This joke works because Tom Hanks is widely considered one of the most trustworthy celebrities in America. He's America's dad. He seems genuine and reliable. The idea that the government would use his credibility to boost their own is both funny and uncomfortably plausible. When Tom Hanks actually appeared in political advertisements supporting various causes and candidates, people immediately thought of that Simpsons scene. The show had captured something true about how celebrity credibility gets leveraged for political purposes. Now, Tom Hanks doing political ads isn't exactly the same as the government literally hiring him as a spokesperson, but the general concept of a beloved actor lending his trustworthiness to political messaging is exactly what the movie depicted. Let me go deeper into the technology predictions because Lisa's Wedding really is a remarkable episode that deserves more attention. The episode aired in March 1995. The internet was still in its infancy. Most people had never sent an email. The World Wide Web was a novelty that tech enthusiasts played with, not something that shaped daily life. Smartphones didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. The technological world of 1995 was radically different from today. And yet, when the Simpsons writers imagined 2010, they got an astonishing amount right. Video calling, smartwatches, virtual reality entertainment, robotic automation, tablet computers, voice-activated devices. All of these appear in the episode in some form. They got some things wrong too, of course. The episode shows commercial airplanes being pulled by horses, which was a joke about technological regression that obviously didn't happen. They show some technologies that remain science fiction even today, but the hit rate is impressive. How did they do it? Part of the answer is that many technological trends were already visible in 1995, even if the technology wasn't mature yet. Video calling had been promised since at least the 1960s. People had been imagining communicating via video screens for decades. The technology just hadn't caught up to the imagination. Smartwatches, as we discussed, had been a staple of science fiction since Dick Tracy. The idea was in the cultural air. Someone just had to build the actual device. Virtual reality was experiencing a boom in the early 90s. VR arcades were popping up. Movies like The Lawnmower Man were exploring virtual reality themes. The technology was clunky and caused nausea, but the concept was established. Every tech magazine was predicting that VR would transform entertainment within a decade. That prediction turned out to be wildly premature. VR didn't become mainstream in the 90s or the 2000s. The technology wasn't ready. It took until the 2010s and 2020s for VR headsets to become practical consumer products. And even now, they haven't fully penetrated mainstream culture. So the Simpsons writers weren't pulling ideas from nowhere. They were taking concepts that were already floating around and imagining how they might be integrated into everyday life 15 years in the future. What they got right was the integration. They showed video calling as a normal, casual thing that people do without thinking about it. They showed smartwatches as everyday tools, not special gadgets for spies or scientists. They imagined a future where technology was seamlessly woven into ordinary life. That's the insight. Not predicting specific devices, but understanding how technology becomes normalized. How things that seem futuristic eventually become mundane. How the wonder fades and becomes routine. We're living in that future now. Video calling your mom is normal. Checking messages on your watch is normal. Playing immersive games with a headset is, if not quite normal yet, at least not remarkable. We carry more computing power in our pockets than existed in the entire world in 1969 when we went to the moon, and we use it to look at pictures of cats. The Simpsons writers understood back in 1995 that the future wouldn't feel futuristic to the people living in it. It would just feel like life. The wonders would become commonplace. The miracles would become mundane. That's a deeper prediction than any specific gadget. Let me talk about some predictions that relate to space and astronomy because there are a few interesting ones in that category. Space has always captured the human imagination, and The Simpsons has used it as a setting for satire multiple times. In various episodes, The Simpsons has made jokes about space tourism, private space companies, and billionaires going to space. These jokes have become more relevant as SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other companies have turned space travel into a reality for wealthy individuals. There's something almost prophetic about the way The Simpsons depicted space as a playground for the ultra-rich. The show understood years before it happened that space exploration would become privatized and that billionaires would compete to leave the planet. Think about what has actually happened in recent years. Jeff Bezos built Blue Origin and flew to space. Richard Branson did the same with Virgin Galactic. Elon Musk is sending civilians to the International Space Station and planning Mars colonies. The space race that once pitted nations against each other has become a competition among billionaires with more money than they know what to do with. The Simpsons saw this coming, not in every specific detail, but in the general trend. They understood that space would be privatized, that it would become a status symbol for the ultra-wealthy, that the final frontier would become yet another arena for capitalist competition. Elon Musk has been mentioned in The Simpsons multiple times, and the show has predicted various aspects of his ventures, though the accuracy of these predictions is debated. Some fans claim The Simpsons showed Mars colonization efforts similar to what SpaceX is planning. Others argue these are stretches. What's definitely true is that The Simpsons has consistently satirized the tech billionaire obsession with space. And that satire has aged remarkably well, as we've watched real tech billionaires pour billions into rocket companies while earthly problems persist. The show also made a joke about discovering water on Mars before NASA confirmed the presence of water ice on the red planet. Again, this wasn't a mystical prediction. Scientists had suspected water on Mars for decades. The Viking missions in the 1970s found evidence that water had once flowed on Mars. The show was just reflecting scientific speculation that turned out to be correct. I want to spend some time on the whole phenomenon of fan communities tracking these predictions because it's become a cultural thing unto itself. The search for Simpsons predictions has become a form of entertainment separate from watching the show. After each major news event, there's now a cottage industry of people searching through old Simpsons episodes looking for connections. Social media accounts are dedicated to finding new predictions. YouTube videos compile the best ones. News outlets write articles whenever a new prediction seems to come true. It's become a meme, a ritual, an expected response to any strange or surprising event. Something weird happens in the news, and within hours someone is posting, "The Simpsons predicted this too." Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're reaching, but the search itself has become part of our cultural response to current events. This phenomenon has actually created a feedback loop. Because people are actively searching for Simpsons predictions, they find connections that might not have been noticed otherwise. A background gag that nobody paid attention to in 2003 suddenly becomes headline news in 2023 because someone found a screenshot and it went viral. The search for predictions has become part of how people engage with The Simpsons. It's not just a show to watch anymore. It's a cultural database to be mined for coincidences. A repository of American society that can be searched for relevance to any current event. This creates some problems. As I mentioned earlier, not all claimed predictions are legitimate. Some are manipulated images. Some are screenshots from completely different contexts that get misattributed. Some are massive stretches where people see connections that aren't really there. The Simpsons prediction phenomenon has become so popular that it spawned its own misinformation. Fake predictions circulate widely. People share images without verifying them. The line between real coincidences and manufactured ones gets blurry. Snopes and other fact-checking sites have dedicated significant resources to investigating Simpsons predictions. They've debunked quite a few, but the debunkings don't spread as widely as the original claims, so the misinformation persists. This is a common pattern with misinformation. The exciting false claim travels faster and further than the boring correction. This is a microcosm of how information spreads online in general. Exciting claims go viral. Corrections don't. The most interesting interpretation of events becomes the accepted one, regardless of accuracy. I'm not saying this to be cynical. The real Simpsons predictions are genuinely fascinating, but it's worth being a little skeptical when you see a new one circulating. Check the source. Verify the episode and air date. Make sure the image hasn't been edited. The real predictions are impressive enough without adding fake ones to the pile. Let me tell you about the psychology behind why we find these predictions so compelling. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains evolved to find connections between events, to notice correlations, to construct narratives that make sense of our experiences. This ability served us well when we were trying to survive in a dangerous world. Finding patterns helped us predict where predators might be, when food might be available, how to navigate our environments. But this pattern-seeking tendency also leads us astray sometimes. We see patterns where none exist. We find connections that are purely coincidental. We construct narratives that feel true but aren't. This is why gambling addiction exists. Our brains find patterns in random events, convince us that we've figured out the system, and keep us betting even when the odds are clearly against us. The Simpsons prediction phenomenon taps into this same psychological tendency. When we see a cartoon from 1995 that resembles a real event from 2020, our brains light up. There's a pattern here, a connection. This means something. And in a sense, it does mean something. It means the writers were observant and clever. It means the show captured trends that continued to develop. It means fiction and reality sometimes intersect in surprising ways. But it doesn't mean The Simpsons can see the future in any supernatural sense. Our brains want to believe in prophets and oracles and time travelers. The reality is more mundane, but I would argue more interesting. The show is a product of smart people paying attention to the world. Their observations sometimes anticipate future events because they understood the trajectories that were already in motion. That's not magic, it's insight. There's also the phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy to consider. When a Simpsons episode depicts something, does that sometimes make it more likely to happen? The Cypress Hill and London Symphony Orchestra collaboration is the clearest example. The musicians involved knew about the Simpsons joke. They referenced it when they announced the real collaboration. It's possible, maybe even likely, that the joke inspired them to actually do it. If a cartoon says Cypress Hill should play with an orchestra, and then the band thinks, hey, that would actually be fun, and then they make it happen, is that a prediction coming true? Or is it the show creating reality rather than predicting it? The line gets blurry. How many other events might have been influenced consciously or unconsciously by their Simpsons depiction? Did Lady Gaga's team watch her animated Super Bowl performance before planning her real one? Did anyone at Disney think about that 1998 episode when considering the Fox acquisition? We can't know for sure, but it's worth considering that predictions aren't just observations about the future. They can be blueprints for it. Let me tell you a few more predictions that I find particularly amusing. In a 1999 episode, Homer and Bart attempt to steal cooking grease from the school cafeteria, intending to sell it for profit. Groundskeeper Willie catches them and chases them off. This seemed like a ridiculous premise at the time. Who would want used cooking grease? What possible value could it have? Then biofuels became a thing. Used cooking oil can be converted into biodiesel. Suddenly, fryer grease had real monetary value, and people started stealing it. In 2008, the New York Times ran an article about grease theft becoming a significant problem for restaurants. The grease that had been a waste product was now worth money, and criminals were siphoning it from grease traps and fryer disposal containers. Homer Simpson was ahead of his time. His scheme was only stupid because he was too early. A decade later, it would have been a legitimate criminal enterprise. There's also the episode about the Florida Python Challenge. In a 1993 episode called Whacking Day, Springfield has an annual tradition of hunting and killing snakes. Lisa objects to this practice as cruel and environmentally pointless. In 2013, Florida started the Python Challenge, a competition to hunt and remove invasive Burmese pythons from the Everglades. The pythons had become a serious ecological problem, destroying native wildlife. The state offered prizes for catching them. The Simpsons' Whacking Day was meant to satirize mindless traditions and environmental destruction, but it accidentally predicted a real snake hunting program that emerged 20 years later. The Florida version was more scientifically justified than Springfield's, but the basic concept of organized snake hunting became reality. And then there's the three-eyed fish predictions beyond just Blinky. After the three-eyed fish was discovered in Argentina in 2011, people went back through Simpsons episodes looking for other environmental predictions. The show has consistently used environmental themes as material for comedy. Nuclear plant contamination, air pollution, water contamination, climate change. Many of these jokes have aged into relevance as environmental issues have intensified. The show's environmental commentary, which sometimes seemed exaggerated in the 90s, now looks prescient. Mr. Burns, the show's primary villain, runs a nuclear plant with flagrant disregard for safety and environmental regulations. He's a cartoonish representation of corporate negligence. But as we've learned more about actual industrial pollution and the ways companies cut corners on safety, Mr. Burns seems less like a caricature and more like a documentation. Let me circle back to something I mentioned earlier and explore it more deeply. The educational value of The Simpsons. This might seem like an odd thing to discuss in the context of predictions, but I think it's relevant. The Simpsons has always been an unusually intelligent show. It rewards viewers who pay attention. It contains layers of meaning that reveal themselves on multiple viewings. The mathematical Easter eggs, the literary references, the historical allusions, the scientific accuracy in throwaway gags. These aren't accidents. They reflect a philosophy of respecting your audience's intelligence. The writers assume that someone out there will pause the episode and check if that equation on Homer's blackboard actually means something. They assume viewers will catch the reference to Kubrick or Hitchcock or Joyce. They assume the jokes will work on multiple levels. This educational dimension of the show is part of why the predictions are so often accurate. The writers do research. They talk to experts. They make sure their jokes are grounded in real knowledge, even when the knowledge is being used for absurd purposes. When you have that kind of commitment to accuracy and intelligence, you end up capturing truths that less carefully made shows would miss. The predictions aren't separate from the show's quality. They're a product of it. Dr. Simon Singh's book about the math in The Simpsons has actually been used in educational settings. Teachers have used Simpsons episodes to teach mathematics, physics, and critical thinking. The show that some parents worried was rotting their children's brains has become a legitimate educational tool. There's a lesson in that for anyone who cares about smart entertainment. You can be funny and substantive at the same time. You can make jokes that work on a surface level while containing depth for those who want to find it. You can respect your audience without losing them. The Simpsons proved that smart comedy can reach a massive audience. The show was the #1 hit on Fox for years. Millions of people watched and loved it. And while many of them were just enjoying Homer's antics, others were catching the deeper references and appreciating the craft. That balance is rare. Most entertainment chooses between being popular and being smart. The Simpsons, in its best years, refused to choose. And part of its legacy is proving that the choice is often false. As we enter the final stretch of our time together tonight, let me offer some thoughts about what all of this means for how we understand our relationship with fiction. Stories have always been predictive in some sense. Ancient myths contained warnings about hubris and fate. Fairy tales embedded lessons about the consequences of certain behaviors. Science fiction has imagined technologies that later became real. What makes The Simpsons different is the specificity and the volume. This isn't a general warning about pride going before a fall. It's a specific president named by name. It's a specific company buying another specific company. It's a specific scientific particle with a specific predicted mass. The show operates at a level of detail that most fiction avoids. And that detail is what makes the predictions so striking when they come true. Maybe this suggests something about the power of paying attention to details. The writers who notice specific things, who include specific references, who create jokes that work on specific levels, are the ones who accidentally predict specific events. Vagueness never predicts anything. If you say bad things will happen, you'll always be right eventually. But if you say Donald Trump will be president, that's a statement that can be verified. It can be right or wrong, and when it turns out to be right, it feels meaningful in a way that vague predictions never do. There's a discipline in specificity. The Simpsons writers committed to details. They named names. They showed signs with specific text. They put real equations on blackboards. And some of those specific details matched future reality. I think there's a lesson there for anyone who wants to understand the world. Pay attention to specifics. Notice the details. Don't settle for vague impressions. The people who really understand where things are headed are usually the ones who can point to specific indicators and extrapolate from them. The Simpsons writers aren't prophets, but they are careful observers. And careful observation, it turns out, can look a lot like prophecy. As you drift off tonight, maybe think about what you notice in your own life. What specific details are you paying attention to? What patterns are you tracking? What might you be able to predict if you really committed to observing? The future isn't written, but the threads that will weave it are already here in the present, waiting to be noticed. The Simpsons has been noticing them for over 30 years. And look where that got them. All right, my friends. I think we've explored this topic thoroughly enough for one evening. We've traveled through decades of Simpsons episodes, through politics and science and entertainment, and the bizarre corners of coincidence. We've thought about why these predictions happen and what they mean. I hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. There's something magical about lying in the dark, letting stories wash over you, feeling your body grow heavy, while your mind stays engaged just enough to absorb the narrative. The Simpsons will keep making episodes. They'll keep making jokes about current events, and some percentage of those jokes will inevitably intersect with future reality. It's the nature of prolific, observant, intelligent satire. When the next prediction comes true, and it will, people will marvel again at the show's apparent psychic powers. And now you'll know the fuller story. You'll understand that it's not magic, but something maybe more impressive: sustained attention, genuine intelligence, and a commitment to capturing the truth of the American experience, even in cartoon form. The night is getting late now. The stars are doing their slow rotation above us. Somewhere in Springfield, Homer is probably asleep on the couch with the TV on, dreaming about donuts. Marge is cleaning up one last dish. Bart is scheming about tomorrow's adventures. Lisa is reading something that will make her smarter. And Maggie is doing whatever it is that silent baby geniuses do when no one is watching. They've been doing this for over 30 years, and they'll probably keep doing it for years to come. A fictional family that has somehow become part of our real national consciousness. A show that started as a rough sketch on a variety program and became the longest-running American animated series in history. Whatever the future holds, The Simpsons will probably have something to say about it. And if we're very lucky, we'll get to look back in 20 years and marvel at the joke that turned out to be true. Until then, sleep well. dream deeply, and remember that the world is full of patterns waiting to be discovered by cartoon writers and ordinary people alike. Good night, my dear friends. This has been a pleasure, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore more stories together. But wait, if you're still with me, let me share a few more thoughts, because the night is long and there are still stories left to tell. Let me tell you about the voting machine prediction. In a 2008 episode called Treehouse of Horror 19, there's a segment where Homer goes to vote in the presidential election. He tries to vote for Barack Obama, but the machine records his vote for John McCain instead. He tries again. Same problem. The machine keeps changing his vote. This was meant as political satire during the 2008 election season. Concerns about voting machine reliability were already a topic of public discussion following the 2000 and 2004 elections. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2012, when Obama was running for re-election against Mitt Romney, actual footage emerged from Pennsylvania showing a voting machine switching votes. A voter tried to select Obama, and the machine recorded a vote for Romney instead. The machine was taken out of service. The Simpsons had depicted exactly this scenario 4 years earlier. A touchscreen voting machine that wouldn't let someone vote for the candidate they wanted. The specific malfunction they imagined actually happened. Let me tell you about another prediction that involves international events. In a 2012 episode, there's a scene with a news sticker scrolling across the bottom of the screen. One of the items reads, "Europe puts Greece on eBay." At the time, this was a joke about how casually Europe might treat the struggling Greek economy. Greece was already having financial problems, but the joke exaggerated them to absurd levels. 3 years later, in 2015, Greece became the first developed country to default on an IMF loan. The European debt crisis reached a peak. There were serious discussions about whether Greece might have to leave the Eurozone. The country's economy collapsed to an extent that felt almost like the joke the Simpsons had made. They didn't literally put Greece on eBay, but the financial desperation the joke suggested became very real. Here's another one involving the world of science and discovery. In a 1998 episode, Homer is shown working on various inventions. One of his projects involves creating a tomato-tobacco hybrid, which he calls the tomaco. The plant produces tomatoes that are highly addictive because of their nicotine content. This was pure absurdist comedy. Crossbreeding tomatoes and tobacco to create an addictive vegetable seemed like the kind of mad science that only Homer would attempt. But in 2003, a farmer in Oregon named Rob Bauer actually created a tomato-tobacco hybrid. He grafted a tomato plant onto tobacco roots, and the resulting fruit contained trace amounts of nicotine. He called it, of course, Tomaco. Bauer was directly inspired by the Simpsons episode. He wanted to see if what Homer did was actually possible. It turned out that it was, at least to some extent. This is another case where the prediction might have caused the reality rather than simply anticipating it. The Simpsons showed something fictional, and then someone in the real world decided to make it real. Let me spend some time on the cultural impact of The Simpsons beyond just predictions, because the predictions are just one aspect of what makes this show remarkable. The show premiered in December 1989 and immediately became a cultural phenomenon. Bart Simpson's catchphrases were everywhere. "Eat my shorts," "Don't have a cow, man," "Ay, caramba." Kids were wearing Bart Simpson t-shirts and using Simpsons slang. Parents were worried that Bart was a bad influence. Schools banned Simpsons merchandise. It was a genuine pop culture moment. I remember the early 90s when The Simpsons was the most talked about show on television. It was edgy in a way that animated shows hadn't been before. It was satirical in a way that felt dangerous. It was funny in a way that appealed to both kids and adults. Nothing quite like it had existed before. But while the merchandise and catchphrases were what made the show commercially successful, the writing is what made it culturally enduring. The early seasons of The Simpsons are considered some of the best television ever made. They combine genuine emotional depth with razor-sharp satire. Episodes like Lisa's Substitute, Bart Gets an F, and Mother Simpson dealt with themes of loss, failure, and family in ways that still resonate today. They weren't just funny, they were moving. They made you care about these yellow cartoon people in ways you didn't expect. I think about Lisa's Substitute sometimes. It's an episode where Lisa falls in love with her substitute teacher, Mr. Bergstrom, voiced by Dustin Hoffman. He's the first adult who really sees her, who appreciates her intelligence and sensitivity. And then he has to leave because substitute teachers always leave. The ending, where Lisa reads the note he left her, still makes me emotional. That's not something you expect from a cartoon. That's not something most sitcoms achieve. But The Simpsons, at its best, was capable of genuine emotional power. This emotional core is part of what makes the predictions feel meaningful. We're not just surprised when The Simpsons gets something right. We're surprised because we care about these characters, and their world seems to overlap with ours in unexpected ways. The writers have always understood that good satire comes from a place of caring. You can't effectively mock something you don't understand. To satirize American politics, you have to actually follow American politics. To satirize technology, you have to actually understand technology. To satirize family dynamics, you have to have experienced family dynamics. This genuine engagement with the subject matter is what gives the show its predictive power. The writers aren't making stuff up from nothing. They're observing the world carefully and extrapolating from what they see. They care about the subjects they're satirizing, and that caring translates into understanding, and understanding translates into insight about where things might be headed. Let me tell you about the show's relationship with guest stars, because this connects to the predictions in interesting ways. The Simpsons has featured hundreds of celebrity guest voices over the years. The list is staggering. Musicians, actors, politicians, athletes, scientists, authors, everyone from Paul McCartney to Stephen Hawking to Michael Jackson to Elizabeth Taylor. Some play themselves, like the actual Lady Gaga voicing her own character in that 2012 episode we discussed. Others play fictional characters while bringing their real-world persona to the role. These celebrity appearances often capture something true about the celebrities involved. The Simpsons version of a famous person isn't just a drawing with a famous voice. It's a satirical portrait that often reveals things about the real person. The writers do their research. They understand who these celebrities are and what makes them tick. When The Simpsons depicted Lady Gaga doing elaborate aerial performances with pyrotechnics and costume changes, they were capturing the essence of her artistry. She's known for spectacle. She's known for going big. Of course she would do something dramatic if she performed in Springfield. And of course she did something dramatic at the Super Bowl. Because that's who she is. The prediction worked because the writers understood Gaga well enough to imagine what she would do in various contexts. They weren't predicting a specific event. They were predicting behavior based on character understanding. This is true of many celebrity appearances on the show. The Simpsons captures essences. When they nail a celebrity's persona, any predictions that follow feel almost inevitable. Of course this person would do this thing. It's exactly who they are. Let me talk about the production of the show and how it relates to the prediction phenomenon. Understanding how The Simpsons is made helps explain some of its predictive accuracy. The Simpsons has an unusually long production timeline for a television show. Each episode takes about 6 to 9 months to produce, and this means the writers are working on episodes that will air half a year or more in the future. Think about what that means. When the writers are writing jokes, they have to imagine what will be relevant 6 to 9 months from now. They can't react to breaking news. They can't make jokes about things that just happened. Everything has to be planned in advance. This long lead time has interesting effects on the show's relationship with current events. The writers have to anticipate what will be relevant months from now. They can't react quickly to breaking news. Instead, they have to predict what kinds of issues will still matter when the episode finally airs. This built-in prediction challenge might actually sharpen their predictive abilities. They're constantly thinking about the future, constantly asking what trends will continue, what issues will persist, what will feel relevant months from now. It's a form of prediction practice built into the creative process. The Simpsons has an unusually long production timeline for a television show. Each episode takes about 6 to 9 months to produce. This means the writers are working on episodes that will air half a year or more in the future. This long lead time has interesting effects on the show's relationship with current events. The writers have to anticipate what will be relevant months from now. They can't react quickly to breaking news. Instead, they have to predict what kinds of issues will still matter when the episode finally airs. This built-in prediction challenge might actually sharpen their predictive abilities. They're constantly thinking about the future, constantly asking what trends will continue, what issues will persist, What will feel relevant months from now? Most television shows react to events as they happen. The Simpsons has to anticipate them. That practice of forward thinking built into the production process might be part of why their predictions are often accurate. The writers also have unusual job security compared to most television writers. Many of them have been with the show for decades. Al Jean has been involved since season 3 and has been showrunner for most of the show's run. This stability means the writers develop deep institutional knowledge. They remember what jokes they've made before. They can build on themes they have established. They understand the show's universe intimately. Long-running patterns emerge. The show has certain recurring concerns, including environmental issues, corporate corruption, political dysfunction, technological change, and media consolidation. When these themes keep appearing episode after episode, year after year, some of the jokes are bound to intersect with actual events. Let me discuss the international impact of The Simpsons and how predictions play out across different cultures. The show is broadcast in dozens of countries and has been dubbed into many languages. What began as commentary on American culture has become a global phenomenon. This international reach means that Simpsons predictions sometimes resonate in unexpected places. The three-eyed fish discovered in Argentina connected with audiences who had grown up watching Blinky swim through Springfield's polluted waters. The horsemeat scandal in Europe reminded British and Irish viewers of lunch lady Doris and her questionable meat supplies. The show's satirical targets, including corporate greed, political corruption, environmental degradation, and family dysfunction, are universal themes. While the specifics are often American, the underlying concerns cross borders. This universality is part of why the prediction phenomenon has become global. People around the world follow these coincidences, not just Americans. The Simpsons has become an international reference point, a shared cultural text that people from many backgrounds can engage with. Let me tell you about some predictions that relate to daily life rather than major news events. In various episodes, The Simpsons has depicted small frustrations and experiences that later became common. The autocorrect issue is one example, but there are others. The show has depicted people becoming addicted to their mobile devices, staring at screens instead of interacting with each other. This seemed like mild exaggeration in the 90s. Now it's just documentary. The show has depicted people believing obviously false information because they saw it on the internet. Again, this seemed like a joke about gullible people. Now it's a major social crisis. The show has depicted celebrity worship reaching absurd levels, with people following famous people's every move and treating them like gods. This was satire. Now it's called influencer culture. These aren't specific predictions that can be verified with dates and facts. They're more like general predictions about the direction of society. The Simpsons saw where things were headed in terms of technology, media, and social dynamics, and they exaggerated those trends for comedy. The exaggerations often weren't exaggerated enough. Reality caught up and sometimes surpassed them. There's something poignant about this. The Simpsons writers thought they were creating absurdist humor. They thought they were pushing things to ridiculous extremes that could never actually happen. And then the world went ahead and made their ridiculous extremes look mild. What does it mean to live in a world that outpaces satire? What does it mean when the absurdist jokes of yesterday become the headlines of today? I think it means we're living in extraordinary times. Times when change happens faster than anyone anticipated. Times when the unlikely becomes routine and the impossible becomes normal. The Simpsons predictions are a record of this acceleration. They mark the distance between what we thought was absurd and what actually happened. They remind us that our imagination often underestimates reality. Let me share one more category of predictions that I think is worth contemplating. Throughout its run, The Simpsons has made jokes about its own continued existence. The show has depicted itself running forever, outlasting everything else on television, becoming an eternal fixture of American culture. These jokes often seem like self-deprecating humor about the show's longevity. By the time you're in season 15 or 20 or 25, you're aware that you've been going a long time. Making jokes about never ending is natural. But the show actually has kept going. It's now in its 36th season. It has over 790 episodes. It's the longest-running American animated series and the longest-running American sitcom. The jokes about eternal continuation have become accurate descriptions. Every time the writers joked about The Simpsons lasting forever, they were making a small prediction about their own future. And so far, they've been right. How much longer can it continue? The show has survived cast changes, network transitions, cultural shifts, and the complete transformation of the television landscape. It's gone from broadcast television to streaming. It's gone from VHS to DVD to digital downloads to Disney+. The Simpsons has adapted to every change the entertainment industry has thrown at it. And it's still here, still producing new episodes, still making predictions that might come true decades from now. There will eventually come a time when The Simpsons ends. Nothing lasts forever, but when it does end, it will leave behind an extraordinary legacy. Thousands of episodes, countless jokes, dozens of verified predictions. A portrait of American life that spans nearly 4 decades, and people will still be discovering new predictions. Someone will watch an old episode and notice something that matches a future event we can't even imagine yet. The predictions will keep coming true long after the show stops making new episodes. That's the nature of rich, detailed, carefully crafted fiction. It contains more than its creators consciously intended. It captures truths that reveal themselves over time. It predicts futures that weren't even being imagined when the words were written. The Simpsons is that kind of fiction. It's a time capsule and a crystal ball, a document of who we were and a preview of who we might become. Let me tell you about a few more specific predictions before we truly wind down. There's the prediction about farm animals being given plastic surgery. In a 1994 episode, Lisa becomes a vegetarian, and there's a throwaway line about livestock getting cosmetic procedures. This seemed absurd. But in recent years, there have been documented cases of show animals receiving procedures to improve their appearance for competitions. The beauty industry has extended to animals in ways The Simpsons imagined decades ago. There's the prediction about censorship of classic art. In a 1990 episode, the townspeople of Springfield put jeans on Michelangelo's David because they find the nudity offensive. This was a joke about American prudishness. But in 2012, a TV channel in St. Petersburg, Russia did almost exactly this, censoring the statue's nudity in broadcasts because viewers complained. There's the prediction about self-driving cars causing problems. Various episodes have shown autonomous vehicles malfunctioning or behaving unexpectedly. Now that self-driving technology is actually being developed and tested, we're seeing exactly these kinds of issues emerge. The technology doesn't always work as intended, just like The Simpsons suggested. There's the prediction about video game addiction being treated as a serious condition. The show depicted characters becoming dangerously addicted to video games before this was widely recognized as a mental health concern. Now, gaming disorder is included in diagnostic manuals and treatment programs exist. Each of these predictions follows the same pattern. The Simpsons take something that exists in a small way and imagines it becoming bigger. Farm animals at beauty shows become farm animals getting plastic surgery. Occasional complaints about art become official censorship. Experimental technology becomes widespread technology with widespread problems. The writers are extrapolators. They take the present and extend it forward. And because the present usually does extend forward, their extrapolations often prove accurate. I find this reassuring in a way. It means the future isn't as unpredictable as it sometimes feels. The seeds of tomorrow are visible today if you know where to look. The Simpsons writers have been looking for over 30 years, and they've helped us see those seeds too. As we truly reach the end of our journey tonight, I want to leave you with one final thought. The Simpsons predictions phenomenon is ultimately a story about attention, about paying attention to the world around us, about noticing patterns and trends, about taking current events seriously enough to imagine where they might lead. In our distracted, fragmented, constantly interrupted modern lives, sustained attention is rare. We scroll through headlines without really reading them. We glance at events without really thinking about them. We move from one moment to the next without pausing to consider where we're going. The Simpsons writers, whatever else you might say about them, pay attention. They look at the world carefully. They think about what they're seeing. They make jokes that require understanding the underlying truth of situations. And that attention, sustained over decades, has given them what looks like predictive power. They're not prophets. They're just paying attention in a way that most of us don't. Maybe that's the real lesson of The Simpsons predictions. Not that the future can be known, but that it can be glimpsed by those who look carefully at the present. The signs are there. The trends are visible. The patterns are detectable. We just have to pay attention. And now, truly, finally, it's time to rest. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body against the bed. The world will still be there when you wake up. The Simpsons will still be there. The predictions will still be there, waiting to be discovered or fulfilled or debunked. For now, though, just rest. Let the stories we've shared settle into your mind. Let the yellow family of Springfield fade into the comfortable darkness of sleep. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for your attention. Sweet dreams, my dear friend. Actually, you know what? Stay with me just a little longer. I have a few more stories that I think you'll enjoy as you drift off. Let me tell you about some of the more obscure predictions that don't get as much attention but are just as fascinating. In a 1995 episode, there's a scene where a character is reading a magazine. On the cover, there's a headline about the Nobel Prize in Economics. The magazine predicts that the prize will go to a specific economist. Milhouse, trying to impress Lisa, fills out a prediction sheet about future Nobel Prize winners. He picks Bengt Holmström, a professor at MIT who specialized in contract theory. At the time, Holmström was well respected in academic circles, but certainly not a household name. In 2016, Bengt Holmström won the Nobel Prize in Economics, sharing the award with Oliver Hart for their contributions to contract theory. 21 years. That's how long it took for Milhouse's prediction to come true. The Simpsons writers picked an actual economist by name, predicted he would win the Nobel Prize, and were eventually proven correct. Now, Holmström was already considered a leading figure in his field when the episode aired. Someone who followed economics closely might have thought he had a good chance at eventually winning the Nobel. But to put that prediction in a cartoon attached to Milhouse of all characters and then have it come true 2 decades later, that's pretty remarkable. Let me tell you about the prediction involving censorship and the statue of David. In a 1990 episode, the people of Springfield are shocked to see Michelangelo's David displayed in their town. The statue's nudity offends their sensibilities, so they put a pair of jeans on it. It's a joke about American prudishness and the absurdity of censoring classical art. In 2012, a TV channel in St. Petersburg, Russia, censored broadcasts showing the statue of David because viewers had complained about the nudity. They blurred out the inappropriate parts. A woman had complained that the statue was too close to a local school and children shouldn't be looking at it. And then, in 2023, a Florida school principal was forced to resign after parents complained that students had been shown an image of the David statue during an art history lesson. Some parents called the classical sculpture pornographic. The Simpsons joke about putting pants on David went from absurdist comedy to news headline over the course of 3 decades. The show captured something about cultural anxiety around nudity and art that has only intensified with time. Here's another prediction that involves everyday technology. In various episodes throughout the 90s, The Simpsons showed characters using tablets, essentially flat screens that could display information, play videos, and connect to networks. These devices appeared years before the iPad made tablets a mainstream consumer product. In the 1994 episode Lisa's Wedding, or Set in the Future, we see tablet-like devices being used casually. People carry them around. They use them for entertainment and communication. They're just part of normal life. Steve Jobs unveiled the first iPad in 2010. It was presented as revolutionary, a device that would change how people consume media and interact with technology. And it did. But The Simpsons had been showing similar devices for 15 years before Apple made them real. Now, tablets weren't a completely original idea in 1994. Science fiction had been imagining portable flat screens for decades. Star Trek had PADDs, various other shows and movies had similar concepts. The Simpsons didn't invent the idea, but they did show it as a normal, everyday technology that regular people would use. They made it mundane rather than special, and that mundane integration is exactly how tablets actually entered our lives. Let me talk about a prediction that hits close to home for anyone who has dealt with modern employment. In various episodes, The Simpsons has depicted workplaces where employees are monitored constantly, where surveillance cameras watch their every move, where software tracks their productivity down to the minute. These depictions seemed like exaggerations of workplace paranoia. They were jokes about corporate control and the dehumanization of workers. Now we have employee monitoring software that tracks keystroke frequency, takes random screenshots of workers' computers, monitors how long they spend on each task, and even uses webcams to ensure people are actually at their desks. Remote work during the pandemic accelerated these trends dramatically. Companies sell software specifically designed to monitor remote workers. They call it productivity tracking or workplace analytics, but it's surveillance by another name. The software can tell your boss exactly how much time you spent on email, how many times you moved your mouse, whether you were actually looking at your screen. The Simpsons showed us a future where Big Brother watched you at work. That future has arrived. The jokes about oppressive workplace monitoring turned out to be understatements rather than exaggerations. There's also the prediction about subscription services taking over everything. In episodes from the 90s and 2000s, The Simpsons joked about people paying monthly fees for things that used to be free or one-time purchases. Software subscriptions, entertainment subscriptions, service subscriptions. The joke was that eventually everything would require a monthly payment. At the time, most software was purchased once. You bought Microsoft Office on a CD and owned it forever. You paid for cable and got everything that came with it. The idea of paying monthly for individual services seemed like a corporation's dream that consumers would never accept. We now live in the subscription economy. Software that used to cost a one-time fee now requires monthly payments. Microsoft 365 costs $10 a month. Adobe Creative Suite costs $55 a month. Enterprise software that used to sell for thousands of dollars now bills annually forever. Entertainment is split across dozens of streaming services, each with its own subscription. Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Apple TV+, Paramount+, Peacock. If you want access to everything, you need to pay for everything every month forever. Cable cutting was supposed to save us money, and instead we're paying more than ever. Even physical products like razors and socks are sold through subscription models. There are subscription services for pet food, for vitamins, for toilet paper. Companies have realized that recurring revenue is more valuable than one-time purchases, and they've structured their businesses accordingly. The Simpsons saw this coming. They saw the economic logic of recurring revenue and extrapolated it to absurdity. And then reality matched the absurdity. We're all now trapped in a web of monthly payments, exactly as the show predicted. Let me tell you about the prediction involving smart home technology. Throughout its run, The Simpsons has shown homes filled with automated systems, from voice-controlled lights and appliances to AI assistants that manage household tasks. These seemed like far future technology when they first appeared on the show. The idea of talking to your house and having it respond was pure science fiction. Amazon introduced Alexa in 2014. Google Home followed in 2016. Smart thermostats, smart locks, smart refrigerators, smart everything became available. The automated home that seemed like science fiction in the 90s is now available at your local electronics store. You can now control your lights with your voice. You can ask your house what the weather is. You can tell your refrigerator to add milk to your shopping list. We're living in the future that The Simpsons imagined, and it happened faster than most people expected. The Simpsons even predicted some of the problems with smart home technology. Episodes have shown systems malfunctioning, making wrong decisions, or being hacked. These aren't just theoretical concerns anymore. There have been real incidents of smart home devices being compromised, of hackers speaking through baby monitors, of voice assistants misunderstanding commands and doing the wrong thing. There was a famous incident where a TV news broadcast about smart assistants triggered thousands of devices in viewers' homes to start ordering products. The show captured both the promise and the peril of home automation decades before most people had any personal experience with it. Here's a prediction about the media landscape that I find particularly interesting. In a 1998 episode, there's a background joke showing multiple news networks that all look essentially the same, delivering the same content in slightly different packages. The joke was about the homogenization of news media, the way competition was leading to uniformity rather than diversity. In 1998, we had CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News competing for viewers. The hope was that competition would lead to better journalism, more perspectives, more diversity in coverage. The reality turned out to be different. That observation has only become more relevant. Cable news networks that were supposed to offer different perspectives often cover the same stories in the same ways. Social media algorithms push everyone toward the same trending topics. The promise of infinite choice has led to a kind of sameness. When a major story breaks, every network covers it the same way. The same clips play on every channel. The same talking points circulate everywhere. We have more media outlets than ever and somehow less diversity in coverage. The Simpsons saw this happening in the late 90s and made a joke about it. The joke has aged into a fairly accurate description of our current media environment. Competition didn't diversify media, it homogenized it. Let me tell you about some predictions related to sports that we haven't covered yet. The show has depicted various sporting events and outcomes over the years, sometimes with surprising accuracy. Beyond the Super Bowl predictions and the World Cup predictions we discussed, there are smaller sporting coincidences scattered throughout the series. There's an episode where Springfield gets a professional football team, and the dynamics of how the team interacts with the town mirror real stories of cities competing for franchises, stadiums being funded by taxpayers, and teams threatening to leave if they don't get what they want. There's an episode about baseball steroids that aired before the steroid scandal that would rock Major League Baseball in the 2000s. There's an episode about corrupt referees that preceded several real-world scandals involving officials in various sports. The Simpsons writers clearly pay attention to sports, and they understand the underlying dynamics of professional athletics. That understanding has allowed them to anticipate problems and scandals that would emerge later. Let me share some thoughts about the writers themselves, because understanding who they are helps explain how the predictions happen. The Simpsons writing staff, especially in the early years, was unusually credentialed for a comedy show. Several writers held advanced degrees from prestigious universities: Harvard, Yale, MIT. These weren't just comedy writers. They were comedy writers who also happened to be mathematicians, physicists, computer scientists, and lawyers. This academic background shows up in the sophistication of the show's humor. The jokes often work on multiple levels. There are references that only people with specific knowledge would catch. There are background details that reward close examination. When these highly educated writers create jokes, they bring their expertise to bear. A physics joke written by someone who actually understands physics might accidentally capture real physics. A political joke written by someone who follows politics closely might accidentally capture real political dynamics. The predictions aren't random. They emerge from deep knowledge and careful observation. The writers know enough about their subjects to extrapolate accurately. This is different from most television comedy. Most shows don't have physics PhDs on staff. Most shows don't put real equations on their blackboards. Most shows don't do the research required to make their jokes technically accurate. The Simpsons does. And that commitment to accuracy, even in service of comedy, is part of what gives the show its predictive power. Let me talk about the role of Matt Groening, the show's creator. Groening came up with the basic concept of The Simpsons and designed the characters based on his own family. The names Homer, Marge, Lisa, and Maggie all came from his relatives, though he changed Bart from his own name. But Groening stepped back from day-to-day writing fairly early in the show's run. The predictions that have made the show famous are largely the work of the writing staff, not Groening personally. That said, Groening set the tone for the show. He established that The Simpsons would be smart, satirical, and willing to tackle any subject. He created a framework that allowed talented writers to do their best work. The predictions are a collective achievement, emerging from the collaborative process of dozens of writers over decades. They're not the vision of one genius, but the accumulated insight of many smart people working together. Let me tell you about some predictions that haven't come true yet, but might. The Simpsons has depicted a future where flying cars are common. We're not there yet, but companies are actively developing flying vehicles, and some have received regulatory approval for testing. The Simpsons has depicted a future where robots do most manual labor. We're getting closer to this with advances in automation and AI, though we're still far from the robot-dominated world the show sometimes portrays. The Simpsons has depicted various political scenarios that haven't happened but could. Without getting into specifics that might age poorly, let's just say the show has imagined many possible futures for America, and some of them might still come to pass. Will these predictions eventually be verified? Only time will tell. But based on the show's track record, at least some of them probably will. The show keeps making observations, and the world keeps turning observations into reality. The prediction phenomenon raises interesting questions about the nature of creativity. When writers imagine future scenarios, they're not creating from nothing. They're combining elements from the present in new ways. They're taking things that exist and imagining how they might evolve. They're extrapolating from trends they observe. Think about what that means for any creative endeavor. When you write a story, you're drawing on your understanding of the world. When you imagine characters, you're drawing on your understanding of human nature. When you create conflict, you're drawing on your understanding of how people and institutions actually behave. The better you understand the world, the more realistic your fiction becomes. And the more realistic your fiction, the more likely it is to intersect with actual events. It's not prediction in the mystical sense. It's just good writing. This means that creative imagination is partly predictive by its nature. Good storytelling requires understanding how things work and imagining how they might work differently. That understanding and imagination can sometimes align with actual future developments. The Simpsons predictions aren't magical. They're the natural result of smart people thinking hard about the world. The fact that some of their imaginings match future reality tells us something about the relationship between fiction and truth. Stories are how we make sense of experience. They help us process what has happened and imagine what might happen. When stories are good, when they capture something true about human nature and social dynamics, they can illuminate not just the present, but the future. This has been true since the beginning of storytelling. Ancient myths contained warnings that remain relevant today. Fairy tales encoded lessons about human behavior that still apply. Shakespeare's plays explore dynamics of power and jealousy and ambition that we see in every era's headlines. The Simpsons is a very good story. It has been telling itself for over 30 years, incorporating observations about American life, technology, politics, and culture. Those observations, accumulated over thousands of episodes, constitute a kind of collective understanding of where we've been and where we might be going. The show is a living document of American society. It has grown and changed as America has grown and changed. It has commented on every president, every cultural shift, every technological revolution, every scandal and triumph and tragedy that has happened in the past 3.5 decades. No single prediction is remarkable on its own. Given enough attempts, coincidences will occur. But the pattern of predictions, the consistency with which the show has anticipated developments across so many different domains, suggests something more than luck. It suggests that paying attention matters. That understanding the present helps illuminate the future. That smart, observant people, given enough time, will notice things that turn out to be important. The Simpsons writers aren't time travelers. They're not psychics. They're not privy to secret knowledge about what's coming. They're just really good at their jobs, which involves understanding American culture well enough to satirize it effectively. And it turns out that understanding something well enough to satirize it is often the same as understanding it well enough to predict it. As we truly, finally reach the end of our time together tonight, I want to thank you again for joining me on this journey. We've covered a lot of ground: presidents and particles, technology and tigers, food scandals and Super Bowls, lemon tree thefts and Nobel Prize winners. We've thought about why predictions happen, who makes them, and what they mean for how we understand the relationship between fiction and reality. We've talked about confirmation bias and pattern-seeking behavior. We've explored the psychology of why these predictions feel meaningful. We've considered the role of self-fulfilling prophecy and the way fiction can shape reality as much as predict it. The Simpsons will continue. New episodes will air. New jokes will be made. And some percentage of those jokes will eventually intersect with future events, prompting new rounds of amazement at the show's apparent psychic abilities. When the next prediction comes true, people will share screenshots and marvel at how the show keeps getting things right. The cycle will continue. The legend will grow. Now you understand the fuller story. You know that the predictions aren't magic, but insight. Not prophecy, but observation. Not supernatural, but deeply human. You know about the writers with physics degrees and the long production timeline and the decades of accumulated cultural observation. The future remains unwritten, but it will be partially legible to those who pay attention to the present. The Simpsons has been reading the signs for over 30 years, and they've helped us learn to read them too. There's something beautiful about that, I think. The idea that by paying attention to the world, by really looking at what's happening around us, we can catch glimpses of what's coming. Not with certainty, not with precision, but with something better than randomness. The future is always being born in the present. The trends that will shape tomorrow are already visible today if you know where to look. The Simpsons has been looking for a long time, and they've found a lot. Sleep now. Let your mind rest. Tomorrow will bring new events, new developments, new surprises. And somewhere in the archives of The Simpsons, there might already be a joke about them waiting to be discovered. The yellow family of Springfield will be there when you wake up, continuing their endless cycle of dysfunction and love, satire and warmth. They'll keep holding up that mirror to American life, reflecting back truths we might not otherwise see. And maybe, just maybe, they'll predict something else that will blow our minds in a decade or two. Sweet dreams, my dear friend, until we meet again. And if you're still somehow awake, if sleep hasn't quite claimed you yet, let me leave you with a few final thoughts to carry into your dreams. The world is a strange and wonderful place. Every day, things happen that nobody predicted. But every day, things also happen that somebody somewhere saw coming. The trick is figuring out which observations matter and which ones are just noise. The Simpsons writers have spent decades separating signal from noise. They've watched the world with curious eyes, asked interesting questions, and turned their observations into comedy. Along the way, some of those observations turned into predictions. But predictions don't have to come from professional comedy writers. Anyone who pays attention can see patterns. Anyone who thinks carefully about the present can glimpse the future. The skill isn't magical. It's just attention and thought, applied consistently over time. You have that ability. We all do. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. They're constantly looking for connections, constantly trying to anticipate what comes next. Most of the time, we don't even notice this happening. But it's there, working in the background, helping us navigate the world. Maybe tomorrow you'll notice something, a trend, a pattern, a development that seems small but might grow. Maybe you'll think about where it could lead. Maybe you'll have your own prediction. And maybe years from now you'll remember that prediction and realize you were right. You'll feel a little thrill, like the thrill people feel when they discover a Simpsons prediction. You'll think, I saw that coming. That's the gift the Simpsons predictions give us, beyond entertainment. They remind us that the future is knowable, at least in part. That understanding isn't reserved for experts or oracles. That anyone who looks carefully can see what's coming. The night is fully dark now. The world is quiet. Sleep is close. Let your body relax. Let your mind slow. Let the stories we've shared tonight settle into your memory, ready to surface again when you think of yellow, animated characters and the future they somehow knew. Tomorrow is another day, another episode in the story of your life, another page in the book of history that someone somewhere might already be writing jokes about. For now, though, rest. You've been on a long journey tonight through decades of television and decades of history. You deserve to sleep. The Simpsons will still be there tomorrow. The predictions will still be there. The mystery and the humor and the insight will all still be there waiting for you. And somewhere in some episode you haven't watched yet, there might be another prediction waiting to be discovered. Another joke that will become a headline. Another gag that will make people say, The Simpsons did it first. That's the beauty of the show. It keeps giving, it keeps surprising. It keeps connecting with reality in ways that nobody expects. Maybe that's why it's lasted so long. Not just because it's funny, but because it matters. Because it says something true about who we are and where we're going. Because it pays attention when nobody else does. For now, just close your eyes. Let the darkness embrace you. Let sleep come. The world will keep turning while you rest. The Simpsons will probably air another episode soon, filled with new jokes, new observations, new potential predictions. Somewhere, a writer's working on a gag that might not make sense for another decade. Somewhere, an animator is drawing a background detail that will become a viral post in 2035. That's the nature of the show. It keeps generating content, keeps producing moments that might intersect with the future. Like a factory of potential prophecies, each episode containing dozens of jokes that could, given enough time, match up with something real. And you, resting here in the quiet dark, are part of this story too. You're part of the audience that keeps the show alive, that notices the predictions, that shares the clips and marvels at the coincidences. Without viewers like you, the predictions would just be jokes that nobody remembered. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about these stories. Thank you for spending this time with me. You've earned your rest. Good night, my dear friend, and truly, finally, completely sweet dreams.